Okay. All right. I'm going to start again. We want to call to order the special meeting, which is workshop of the Children's Trust of Alachua County for August 17th. And you may or may not notice that we're in a different place. I'm live from the new digs of the Children's Trust building. And so hopefully the internet works a little better here than it does out in the boonies. So now where we're going to start out the meeting is like we do everyone. And that's just giving everybody the how this meeting is going to work. And if you are listening or watching this meeting through the webinar format, please use the raise your hand function. Simply click on the participants icon in the Zoom toolbar and look for the raise your hand button on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Those of you viewing the meeting through the webinar may also comment via the chat function. If you are watching via Facebook Live and would like to comment, please call the call-in number, which is 1-346-248-7799. I'll repeat that. It's 1-346-248-7799, and use the meeting ID, which is 837-1965-626. And I'll repeat that again, 837-1965-2626. So the first thing we're going to do is a roll call, and Member Certain?
Here.
Member Clark?
Here.
Member Cole Smith? Member Cornell?
Here.
Member Hart? Member Hart? Okay. Member Labarda? Member Labarda?
She's muted. I see her.
Okay. Okay. Member Snyder?
Here.
Member Twombly?
Here.
Member Wilson Bullard?
Here.
And I'm here. Okay. First thing is the approval of the agenda. And first of all, are there any revisions to the agenda, or is there any questions about the consent agenda? If there isn't, then I'll take a motion for both.
So moved. Second.
Thanks, Ken. Have a motion in a couple seconds. And do we have any discussion from the board? Do we have any public discussion? Ashley, do you see anybody? Okay. Member Labarda?
Aye.
Okay. Member Certain?
Aye.
Member Clark?
Aye.
Member Cole Smith?
Aye.
Member Cornell?
Aye.
Member Hart? Member Snyder?
Aye.
Member Twombly?
Aye.
Member Bullard?
Aye.
And aye. Okay. All right. And I think I'm going to turn it over at this point. Oh, first thing we want to do is apparently there was a little bit of consternation on the state's part about the last resolution we sent. So we redid it. And so we're going to send another resolution. So we need a motion for that, if anybody would be kind enough to do so.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion.
Lee, actually, that was part of the consent agenda, so we're good.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. All right. Thanks. Okay. Then it's been approved. All right. The first thing we want to do, I think what I'll do is I'll probably turn it over to Colin at this point. And I think this is probably the big ticket item for today. So, Colin.
Yes, and actually, I'm going to turn it over to Anna Delernia. She has the complete agenda set forth for our discussion. The materials are in your packet. There's quite a bit there, but I think she'll do a great job getting us through it and leave plenty of time for us to talk. So without further ado, Anna Delernia.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. So today I'm going to walk you through the portfolio review and also a discussion related to the priorities related to indicators. So I'm going to share my screen, and I would recommend if you can put me in probably speaker view so that you can have a good sense and see the full screens, because there are lots of graphs and data points. I know as I'm presenting, it might be a little hard for me to see the chat. or you raising your hand. So if Ashley or Colin could just, let me know if somebody has a question. I will stop and ask, if they're question and discussion items, obviously. But today is the workshop part of the Children's Trust, the Children's Trust of Alachua County. We're here to talk and, find some answers for certain areas. So here's an outline of what we're going to go over today. It's in 3 parts. So the first part I'm going to go over, which is the portfolio review, which we had mentioned to you before. And then the second part is really around going over the information from the Technical Advisory Committee related to the results and indicators that the Children's Trust has adopted, and really getting to a sense of what opportunities exist given the data that's available to us, right? And then next up will be, after we have a conversation on the indicators, talking about funding strategies and what action can we actually take to turn the curve. So again, it's going to be in 3 parts. The first up is going to be the portfolio review. And I believe everybody had a chance to look through this in advance. But again, I'm gonna go through it. So if there's any questions or areas for clarification, I'll stop and I'm happy to answer any questions. All right, you guys all ready? We do silent applause. Wee, ready. Okay. Okay, so first up, like I said, the section is going to be around the portfolio review, right? So what was the purpose of going through the portfolio review? So these are all included in this for all the programs that are currently funded by the Children's Trust in the last year or so, to give us a baseline for strategic conversations, right? And some of the questions are there, just who, like organizationally, who are some of the organizations we're funding? What partnerships or collaborations are being utilized by these programs, where, like geographically, where that funding is going, how much is being funded, and then the latter areas about how well is the portfolio performing and what impact it had. So the higher level ones, like how well and what impact, are a little hard to tell because at this point, most of the programs do not have programmatic data that's been reported yet. So can't really tell you that too much, but I can tell you, some big themes I'm seeing based off of what was included in the scope of services and their contracts to just get a sense of where we could go when we evaluate the portfolio. So without further ado, I'll start diving in unless there's any questions. What I did for all the scopes of services, so I basically combined information that was publicly available plus the contractor scope of services across all the programs, including the IRS 990 forms if they were available. We also utilized Philanthropy Hub from the Community Foundation. If it was available, they had profiles that they set up. And if they were selected for a deep dive, which included the 3 early childhood programs, the transformational professional development, the healthy social emotional development and family support program, and the newborn home visiting, those programs, I had their final reports for their program and also conducted interviews to get their feedback. So those are the only 3 programs where I have a deeper sense of where they're at. But for across every single program, I was able to give you this high-level snapshot of organizational data and program data. In every program, we shared this with them on August 4th. We had a webinar to share the initial portfolio review with all the funded programs so that they could take a look at their own snapshots and get a sense of it if they wanted to make any edits or changes. It was a very initial discussion. This is in no way a program evaluation, but again, a portfolio review so you have a sense of what is the landscape and what is currently being funded by the Children's Trust. So what are we seeing in the portfolio? So across all the funding that we did, there were 43 agencies being funded, 47 programs, because some agencies had a couple of programs, more than one, and around 15,000 children that we expected to serve across all those programs. And that's highly likely that there's duplicates. This is not unduplicated data, since one site might have more than one type of programming available. You might have a program that's serving children where they're both getting mental health supports and also getting tutoring, right? It's the same kind of site. So it's very likely that there's duplicates within that 15,000 children. And in total awards that was funded around $3 million, with the median award around $30,000, with $29,554, and big ranges in the award amounts from everything from around $5,800 to $440,000. So big ranges in what was awarded in the current portfolio. So that's basically to answer the question, the high level, who is the Children's Trust funding? Do you have any questions about this as we start going in? I don't see any hands or anything. Nope, I'm gonna keep going. All right. So in addition to looking at the program snapshots, I did mention that I looked at information from publicly available sources, or if they had sent them in, the IRS 990 information. So that just tells me, organizationally, not programmatically, 45% of them did have available 990 information. So it gives me a sense of the organizational size, what kind of revenue they're working with. And the median revenue across the ones that I did have information for, again, I didn't have it for over half the portfolio, was around $773,000, right? So that's the kind of median size, but big ranges again in the portfolio in agencies, everything from total revenues of $33,000 to $41 million. Big ranges in the scope of what agencies you're funding. Also, I found out the ages of the agencies, the median age was 17 years old, assuming based on their year that they were established. So in 2020, your ages, they're about 17, so they're about to go off to college or about to graduate high school. So they've been around for a good chunk of time. So a lot of these organizations are well established and been around in the community for the ones I did have for data for. So just a good sense to get a sense of, you do have a broad range of organizational size. And again, good thing is many of them have been around for many years. Now, thinking about what you're funding, again, I did this as based of type of program. So I looked in the scope of services, read through types of activities that the agencies were funding and serving, providing based on what their scope of services was. And I categorized them into program types. So you probably have never seen this before. And this just gives me a sense of what type of services are being provided, right? So I generally put them into health buckets. So health would be direct health services in general care. Might be everything from primary care services at a free clinic. And then we also have health in mental health, since we did have some programs that were providing therapy, or either a group or one-on-one individualized therapy. And we also had one program that was providing oral health access, so dental care for children. And the other bucket would be what I'm calling out of school time / youth development. So 31 programs funded in that portfolio of youth development programming. And the other area was professional development. So there were 4 programs that were funded in professional development in various different ways, but that would be things focused on, say, program quality, something where you're working with the staff of the programs to help improve them in some way, or improve the network of people related to that type of programming. So across the board, you'll see probably a third of the funding went into health type work. Another third went into out of school time / youth development, and the remaining funding went into things like professional development and other. There were some programs that didn't necessarily fit into a general bucket, so I put them in other. They include things like paying for a transportation van to help people, and also basic needs. So kind of just 3 programs that just didn't really quite fit into the other areas. Any questions about kind of the type of programs being funded? Again, this is general categorization based on the types of activities that were offered in the services. Nope, all right. Okay, so the next one is target population. So again, going through the scopes of services, many of them asked within their scopes, what were your target population? Who are you recruiting for this program, right? And based on different age groups and things of that nature. So we did have one program that was serving the broad spectrum of just children, probably 0 to 18, all things of that nature. We had 3 programs directly supporting early childhood programming, or support for affecting a target of early childhood. So say, even if you were doing a professional development focus on early child care center providers, you are helping to support and move the needle related to early childhood. And the rest of the programming was focused on school age, right? So that's the 6 to 18-year-olds with kind of broad breaks, about elementary, middle, and high school. So again, most of the funding is kind of split up about half into early childhood and then into school age. Any questions? I see a chat, but it's a little hard for me to see the chat when I'm in presentation mode.
Yeah, Anna, this is Colin. One of the question was actually from the public, but it's a good question. And it says, can you describe the professional development bucket more? What ages of children does this professional development support?
Sure, yeah. So the programs that were funded in the professional development bucket included 2 that were focused on early childhood. And there were 1 focused on kind of all ages, actually. That one that's all ages was helping for getting churches better connected, and helping them with professionalism. So the professional development one was kind of all ages, but the more sophisticated programming went into early childhood, which we're actually going to talk about a little bit later when we go a little deep diver into 2 of those programs. And then there was the Boost program, which was helping to support after school programs. So there were 4 programs related to that. Okay, now next up was thinking of the intensity of services. And this is neither good nor bad, but I think as you think through scopes of services and like what you're providing, and like, how much support you're providing to different types of activities. So these are basically if you are the target population for a certain program, how many touch points would I typically have with that program? So we had everything from one-time events. For example, maybe the program was offering workshops to middle schoolers. That workshop you probably would just attend one time because they were rotating around different schools providing workshops, right? So as a participant, I would have only have gotten 1 touch point with that program, versus something where I might have had a short-term engagement where I've had maybe 1 or 2 touch points, but typically less than a week of engagement with a program. And the final bucket is ongoing, right? So like a summer camp, right? You're going to go attend the summer camp more than once, or an after-school program, a child is going to attend every day, right? If you're getting daily supports or weekly supports, if you're maybe a teenager and things of that nature. So a good majority of the programs do end up having ongoing engagement. So you can see, 2/3 of it end up in the ongoing engagement or weekly kind of high dosage intensity of services. Again, this is neither good nor bad, but it's just something to keep in mind. I think long-term, when you think about performance measures, like what's the appropriate performance measure for programs? If you're offering, say, one-time events, you don't necessarily want to tie that program to a giant increase in literacy gains. If, say, it's like a book given out, you can't necessarily, that doesn't make quite sense if the dosage doesn't match up. So just,
Anna?
Yeah, go ahead.
We also have someone with their hand up, Dr. Karen Cole-Smith.
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah,
You mentioned that there were 15,000 children that were served. What is the demographic breakdown of those children as it relates to race and ethnicity? And also I'd be interested in the locale. Were most of the programs funded in support of East Gainesville programs and initiatives, or in other areas?
At this point, we do not have participant level data reported to the Children's Trust. We really only have scope of services. So we don't even have the actual number that were served. We have an expected number based on what was included in their scope of services. So unfortunately, all that information is not known to the trust. We just have basic information on, hey, the plan was that you served 100, and the demographic information for the most part wasn't asked for in the scope of services. It was more age groups. They did have quite a bit of, but it wasn't quite as clustered. So I wouldn't know, unfortunately. As for your question about geography, I do have a map that I can show you. Again, and we'll go to that one in just a second, so we can see like where the programming is typically taking place. Again, it's just like kind of initial what we know now without like a deep evaluation. We don't have any individual data.
Thank you.
Sure. And head to your next question about sites, right? So again, I pulled information from the scopes of services to see what sites were offering services. There are some sites that are countywide, and there also were a number in the last few months that switched to virtual sites only because of the COVID-19 response. So that's not represented on this map. And I will say this, within the scopes of services, sites were probably one of the harder ones to find out. And so this is probably not even fully representative of what's going on in the portfolio, but you can kind of see the blue shading on this map is children living in poverty based on the ASC surveys from census data at the zip code level. And then a good cluster of the sites are happening in the middle, Gainesville proper, which is where a lot of the children that are in poverty are living and things like that. But again, I don't have like the world's best geographic picture. This information was a little messy, a little dirty, and a little incomplete. But I think it gives you just like an initial, like, here's where some of the sites are. And again, now that we know that with the pandemic going on and COVID-19, there have been programs that switch to virtual programming and things like that. So that's not represented. And there's a number of county-wide programs for like a mobile van, they're moving around the county, or say the nurse home visiting program, they're going into homes. So they're serving people all over the place. Okay. Now thinking about, again, so there's like higher level questions about how well is a portfolio performing. We don't have that kind of data. And lots of the scopes of services, quite frankly, didn't have a lot of information that would inform that type of question, right? So I would say a majority only included something along the lines of, if I said I would serve 100 children, at the end of the program I served 100 children, I could get a percent of participants served, which is a very basic level of like how well that program did. Things that I would typically measure if I was evaluating a portfolio related to like how well they did, things like staff certifications and trainings, particularly making sure that they're in compliance with all of, DCF things and, or school-based programs. Things of that nature were not included, even like as just basic, just basic staff qualifications. Things like safety, again, quality of the sites, making sure all the sites are meeting safety standards, CPR certifications, all the general things you tend to want when you're working with children and families. A lot of those metrics weren't necessarily included, and it's just something to keep in mind moving forward, to keep that in mind. Also, quality is not one that's typically included in any of these, and I know Colin is, has spoken to you a bit about some other quality metrics you might want to consider. Staffing ratios, again, missing from majority of the programs, and participant satisfaction. Again, majority of the programs did not include information, and it's more on the Children's Trust than it is on the programs, right? If we're like, this is something you would want to consider as you put out different funding. These are some metrics that will help you identify programs that are running very well or really smoothly. Just give you a sense of that. So there's something to address with future programming. Anyone better off? Now, outcomes, quite a bit of them included perfectly good outcome data, or metrics that would measure outcomes. Things like change in skill, change in knowledge, or a change in behavior. All those, many of them said they would do pre-post tests, things of that nature. I will say that it was very broad in the outcomes, and it wasn't specific saying that they were going to use, say, an evidence-based measurement tool, a certain type of common survey that would be typically used, things of that nature. So it's just like inconsistency in how a lot of that outcome data was presented within their scopes of services. I think moving forward, you're probably going to want to get to a point where you are kind of addressing common outcomes that use standard tools so that you can get high quality information about your portfolio so that is anyone better off moving forward, or if they are proposing a different type of measurement tool or a different kind of outcome, you have all those details available. So that's just one thing, again, to keep in mind with the portfolio. It's an area that could be improved on for future funding. Any questions about this? Okay, so again, as I mentioned, majority of the portfolio, we only have basic level information available to us. But we did have a chance to do a deep dive into the programs that were originally funded under the Children's Services Advisory Board. So these are, I did a little bit more programmatic snapshots, and I have their final reports, and I had a chance to interview them over Zoom so that I could get a better sense of how those programs were doing, and so I could share back some of those results with you, which I'm sure you all would like to know. And so those 3 programs, I put the lead agencies. So these were, for the most part, focused on early childhood, and actually all of them were focused on early childhood 0 to 5, right? So we have our programs focused on moms and baby infants with the newborn home visiting to the healthy social and emotional family support led by Meridian, and the Child Center for transformative professional development. So again, all within the early childhood range of 0 to 5 or 0 to 4, something of that target population. So I'm going to go into each of these programs to give you a high-level snapshot of how, like, using the RBA results-based accountability framework. So the first one up we have is the Child Center. And again, you have like a programmatic snapshot of this. And this was their transformative professional development program. And this program was focused on 2 things. One, providing professional development. I think somebody had a question about that, for early childhood centers, using a partnership with the Zucker Center on their practice-based coaching model. So they were implementing an evidence-based model of practice-based coaching, and they were able to do this at the Child Center itself, and also with partnership with 12 other early learning sites across Alachua County. And so within this model, they had both professional development and also direct services for children and families at the child care center specifically. So we have the information related to how much within professional development and also in children and families. So high level for them, they were able to implement this model of practice-based coaching at the child center itself, and also 12 early learning child care center sites. And that led to 48 early childhood professionals across those sites receiving professional development supports. So a lot of this work is all related to improving the quality of early childhood center staff. So a lot of this is based off of implementing an evidence-based model so that the staff of these early childhood centers are able to deliver supports with high quality standards so that children are better off, right? So that's the professional development side. They did a number of training and coaching sessions with these staff members, and they developed a number of materials like checklists, needs assessment, coaching logs, all those things that they would need to implement this evidence-based model, which is called practice-based coaching, across not only the child center, but also these 12 other sites. Now related to children and families, at the child center, they also served on average 49 children per month there, and they also screened them for developmental delays and provided workshops for families. So that's the how much, thinking about the child center. This one had quite a bit of partnerships with the Zucker Center, in particular, OB2 Kids, which is the organization that helped run these programs at the child center, Early Learning Coalition of Alachua County. They help support a lot of these programs, and one of the instructors that was trained in practice-based coaching, the lead instructor was based out of the Early Learning Coalition, and they worked with Head Start. I think some of the classrooms were Head Start classrooms, and the Southwest Advisory Group. So it gives you just a sense of like how much was done. Now, related to how well, again, this is the same program at the child center. There was high rating of the training that was provided. So people thought the training was highly rated when they did receive it. High fidelity to the model, which oftentimes is what you want to see when you're seeing the utilization of an evidence-based model. Are the staff implementing it as it's intended? And so high fidelity was shown toward these coaching models. And then participants who were involved in the training and coaching, they did find it to be very beneficial. Now for the family side, the children and family side, again, this is only the children that were at the child center. Their parents were very satisfied with the programming, particularly in helping them prepare their children for kindergarten. Now, is anyone better off? So again, we're following a results-based accountability model for this particular program. So all the teachers that did receive practice-based coaching were able to enhance their teaching skills, right? Their teaching practice were better off based on the action plans that they use as part of this model. And quality. So one thing I think was particularly good to see was at the Child Care Center, they were able to move their program quality up from a standard tool, which is called a class tool for early childhood, and that was able to move up from year 1 to year 2. Now, when we're thinking about children, again, the children served here, they're mainly at the Child Center directly, because the biggest focus of this program is professional development. The 11 children that they had enrolled in BPK did demonstrate growth on the skills assessments, and you can see like changes for certain domains within it, with probably the largest coming from print and mathematics and oral literacy. So Child Center, again, high level program snapshot of what they did, how much they did, how well they did it, and is anyone better off? Any questions about this program? Again, this is just a deep dive into this program, but again, it just gives you just a general sense of what they were doing as a program snapshot.
Anna, and I'm sorry, I cannot find my raise hand
No problem.
button. Where is that again, Colin or Mr. Chair?
You can just raise your hand. I see you just
Here.
fine.
It's just,
Your hand is counted as raised.
okay, good. So my question, Anna, has there been any assessment or survey of the other program sites
I don't
as
have
there was with the
information.
Child Center?
So yeah, so in this particular program, the only funding that directly went to helping improve children and families was at the Child Center. All the teacher type metrics are across the Child Center and these other 12 sites.
So were the teachers surveyed within those other programs?
Yeah, so the ones who are part of the practice-based coaching, right? So the way the model works is if you are an early childhood center staff member, you get assigned a coach, and the coach helps you based on your own needs and action plans to improve your classroom management or certain skills. So those were across the sites. Is that clear?
Are there any plans to survey the other sites the same way you did with the Child Center as far as the parents or the participants?
I'm not sure. I mean, at this point, this is like the low information I have. We can always ask them to see, how much improvement is happening. Again, these are pretty early programs. I think this program's only been around for 2 years, so it's a little early. I think in some ways, I know data collection in general is probably something to improve on across the portfolio. So, but we can ask Colin. I don't know if you. I don't think we know offhand.
So Dr. Snyder is on here. I don't know. I mean, she would know best, but I think what you're asking, Judge, is, for example, in the class scores where they measured teachers' teaching quality, was that done at the other sites? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. And I thought that you indicated that there was a survey also of the, I thought it was of the parents or.
Yeah, the parents survey was
the Child Center.
Child Center. So specifically the Child Center, and the quality metric of the class score, the only one I have is of the Child Center itself.
So that it was twofold. It was twofold. It was of the instructors and then also of the parents, similar to the Child Center survey.
Yeah, correct. I don't know if we have that information or if they've collected it already, but we don't have it right now to give you. For the most part, majority of the information I have is related to the practice-based coaching model and how it was implemented, and less related to kind of the site level information you would see, particularly around the other 12 sites beyond the Child Center.
Okay. All right.
So to answer the question, this is Pat, Judge Bullard, the data are available for the other sites through the Early Learning Coalition, because this is a measure that they have to use as part of their quality rating and improvement system on an ongoing basis. So those data in the final reports will be available, of course, but they're available now through the Early Learning Coalition, and the Early Learning Coalition reports those data to the state.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Judge, if you don't mind me interrupting for half a second, to answer your question, you click on the participants icon down at the bottom, And when you click on that, it'll flash up something and it'll say, raise your hand on the right-hand side. So that's how you raise your hand.
Okay. So,
Go ahead.
There's 2 hands up also, by the way.
oh, go ahead. More hands up. Go ahead.
Karen Cole Smith, her hand is up.
Hope you're muted. I can't hear you, ma'am.
Yes, under the children, when you talked about children's growth, it's very specific and you list print knowledge, mathematics, oral language. Under the teachers, when you talk about the teaching practices, and I'm assuming that the teaching practices improved, do you have some specifics in terms of what actually improved as it relates to teaching? Obviously, there are various teaching styles for different groups of students. Do you have more specifics there under that heading?
So the particular, it depended on the teacher. So they were all utilizing, I believe, a standard tool for classroom observation called the TPOT. I think I'm saying the acronym correctly. And so within the teacher, it's very teacher-led based on what they want to improve on. So it's based on like an action plan. So that's kind of the difference between a practice-based coaching model versus kind of the class tool, which has like more of a general quality metric. So they were helping to support the teachers in the early learning centers improve things that they've identified that they want to improve on. So some of those things are like classroom management and things of that nature, or social skills. There's a lot of different areas, and I'm not an expert on this by any means, and so I can tell you that. But I did not have that level of like, hey, they changed on A to B or within like kind of these standard buckets, because it was very individualized, it seemed.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Yeah, Commissioner Cornell
Can-
also has his hand up.
Yeah, real quickly, thank you, Mr. Chair. And to follow up on what Pat and Judge had asked, so as I understand slide 26, there were 30 teachers that had an average of 9.3 practice-based coaching sessions, 280 practice-based coaching sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do have data on, of those 30 teachers, how many kids were able to be exposed to this practice-based coaching, and will we have this year the results of how well those kids performed compared to prior years? Or I think that's ultimately the outcome approach that we're looking for. It's an amazing amount of reach that we got, that we were able to leverage with this, but I'm curious if we know how many kids.
I think it's
And
around,
the
I believe
doc-
they included it based off of, I do have the information, I think it's based off of like the number of licensed slots they have at the sites. And I think it was around 1,300 that were reached by the
And-
practice-based coaching
Right,
model.
and then to follow up on Dr. Cole Smith's request of those 1,300 kids, then how many of them were in high-risk categories versus others? I mean, that's the data I think I would be looking for and would appreciate gathering when this
Yeah.
is ultimately done.
Well, majority of this information, again, is focused on professional development, right? So the evaluation questions tend to focus on the model and like the change in behavior based on the model, right? So you won't get as much child level data in this type of program, but it's something to think about for other things, right?
So we'll get data based on the teacher's ability to
Right.
teach from their
Correct.
perspective. Okay, gotcha.
Correct,
Thank you.
yeah. Mhm.
Thank you.
Snyder, looks like you have your hand up.
I just to follow up, I think a couple of points that Anna made that I think are important is to keep in mind when we think about professional development supports for changing teaching practices, that until teachers are implementing these practices with fidelity and improving the quality of their interactions and their instruction, we shouldn't expect an immediate change in children's performance, right? So if you think about it, it's like you have to take your medicine every day until you start to see effects on yourself. And it's a while until you see effects on yourself that you might be seeing effects on people that are more distant to you. So it's not that we won't see child effects, but I think we have to understand that they're not going to be the most immediate effects. The most immediate effects, most proximal effects, as we refer to them, would be on the teachers themselves. And so the fact that we saw changes in classroom quality scores, both at the Child Center, and I happen to know from the ELC data, we saw it in those classrooms as well, where they were out in the community based sites. I think we can look, and the ELC collects data on child outcomes, so we can start to see over time if we're seeing changes in the VPK performance, the VPK assessments for children who are enrolled in those centers. But everybody, including me, wants the quick fix. But what we've learned through decades of this work is that we have to make sure that we're supporting those who are interacting every day with children and families with high quality practices so that we can get to the promised land of improving child outcomes. So while I really appreciate what you all are saying, and you're absolutely right, Lee, that is the ultimate return on the investment that we want to get to, but we want to be patient about not abandoning something because we're not seeing those immediate effects on children. And I think if we could change this conversation to 3rd grade reading scores as well, or 9th grade math assessments. So it's just really important to keep in mind tracking that and watching that change in children, but also making sure, as Anna said, that there's fidelity to the model and that there's fidelity in terms of the practices that are being implemented in these classrooms every day with young children.
Thank you, Dr. Snyder. Anna?
Thank you. Yes, that was great. Okay, I think I'm going to go over to the next program snapshot, which this is the lead agency is Meridian Behavioral Health. And this program is focused on healthy social emotional development and family support. So the intent with this one was, again, focus on early childhood to bring in kind of a twofold approach where you are doing professional development and training and also direct services for children and families. So similar to the Child Center, where they have program activities directly supporting professional development, again, where you're trying to help improve the quality of service delivery of these early childhood care center staff. And then the additional side, which is direct services towards children and families. So this one had a different model where it was very focused and a big partnership with the Partnership for Strong Families and the Child Advocacy Center. They supported 5 different early learning centers, and if you actually see, I did note that 2 of them also received the transformative professional development program too. So there was a little bit of an overlap in the sites because they were, I think it was voluntary and based on what the Early Learning Coalition recommended on sites, and if the site actually wanted to participate in this type of programming and support. So there were, these parents and these children were receiving supports from different ways. And this program focused a lot on, classroom behaviors and helping improve things like reducing child abuse, prevention trainings, trauma-informed care. So this professional development had a different focus than practice-based coaching, right? So this is a different kind of focus in general. I'm trying to move you guys a little bit lower so I can see. So again, this was supportive. The coaching sessions were helping to focus on early childhood care staff, things like behavior management. So a big problem that tends to happen, I'm not sure this actually has happened in my own family, not with my nephew, is that with early learning centers, sometimes when a child is having behavioral issues, they will be expelled from the program, which means that then the parents have nowhere to, have their child in childcare settings, but a way to help prevent it from getting that bad, basically a situation where a child needs to be expelled for behavior issues. There are different supports that can be provided to prevent, suspensions or expulsions, which seems a little silly that you'd want to, expel a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old from a program, but it certainly happens. And it often can be prevented by improving, classroom management skills and helping to support the children themselves with behavioral and mental health support. So this was a twofold approach to focusing on that, helping to support the staff with training and then also helping us support the families with the children that had behavioral health issues. So of the children and families that were served across these sites, 76 received behavioral health and mental health support. 16 received screenings and different types of assessments based on their needs. They also conducted different types of home visits. A big part of the Partnership for Strong Families was to also provide what they call support for protective factors. So things like basic needs or helping to link with their families directly with, say, like rent assistance or food assistance or job training. So quite a wraparound kind of model related to children and families for this program. So thinking about how well they did. So again, they rated the staff that participated in it 100%, agreed that the counselors from Meridian were available. Again, the idea was to help support these staff members with supports so that they could help behavioral issues from becoming bigger problems, right? And then again, 100% were very happy with the program partners. So that was everything from the Partnerships from Strong Families and the Child Advocacy Center to help support the parents and their families directly in their program. And of the families that were supported with this program, 100% of the families that needed other types of services were linked to it. So it provided like a good, again, sort of wraparound approach for these child care centers. Now thinking about if anybody is better off, right? So there's not like necessarily strong data on this. There wasn't necessarily a measurement tool used, but they did see based on the training and observation of the staff at these centers that there was an increase in the tolerance for understanding what normal childhood behavior looks like and ways to like redirect it in that way. So again, there was a general increase in tolerance for the staff in understanding what does normal childhood behavior look like. 88% of the early learning staff agreed that they were able to improve their confidence in managing difficult behaviors and also their knowledge of classroom management improved. And I think the other one related to for the professional development section was related to the child care staffs were improve their ability to engage students in a structured activities, which is a very important skill for them to have. Now for the outcomes related to children and families, we did see that of the parents that had, I think, pre and post tests, they did see that their families increased protective factors. So they were able to essentially become more stable in a family. So there was 78% of those families that had data. 0 children of those sites were expelled or suspended. And 88% of children did improve their behavior. So those that were involved in behavioral supports and getting say counseling and things of that support did improve based off of a standard measurement score for 88%. So some changes we're seeing from the Meridian program and the healthy social and emotional development. Any questions? Nope. Okay. Perfect. My screen is perfect. Okay, so the last program focused on early childhood. Again, this is targeting new moms and babies across the county. So this is the lead agency is the Healthy Start of North Central Florida for their newborn home visiting program. I love a good pun, by the way, so A+ to whoever came up with that. So thinking about this program is actually impressive in the scope that it tries to serve. They're trying to serve basically the entire population of all new moms that reside and deliver in the county. So they were able to serve around 2,500 moms were offered the program. Of those, they had around 1,300 consent to participate in the program, and then 773 completed the home visiting program. So this is where the nurses go into after a mom and baby deliver. Those they are assigned a home visit so that a nurse can come and help support the mom with different types of medical support, including like checking their vitals and things of that nature, incisions, wound care, things like that. environmental, making sure the baby has a safe sleeping environment, and behavioral care, just making sure that the parents have the right types of education around normal infant care and things of that nature. So considering all the work they did, again, and they're trying to target the entire population of babies that were born in Alachua County, which they're in the year that we have data for them, it was around 3,600 babies that were born. So they were able to offer the program to 67% of people, which is a good chunk of the parent people who were born, right? So the babies that were born or the moms, it's a very population type metric, which is rare, I would say. 53% consented to participate. So, getting about half of them that they were able to talk to. And based off of like their monthly trends, a lot of this actually improved over time. They seem to have gotten better at getting people to consent to the program and also like the word out as time went on. So it's something to consider as well. It's like as time went on, they've gotten better at the outreach side and they've improved things throughout the program. 57 completed the home visit program, and then 99% would recommend this program to a friend. So very high satisfaction with this program from parents. Now thinking about, is anyone better off? 100% of the moms voice understanding of the knowledge that was provided during the home visit. 100% of families that had been identified with unsafe sleeping environments were given pack and plays. 75% were, I think, were given additional home visiting. So if they were eligible for additional types of services, they were linked to it. And also 100% received a welcome baby bag, including different information about WIC and a book and different types of, postnatal education. And probably the most important part, I think, of this program is that there were actual incidences of where the nurse visit saved moms' lives, where they were able to identify some like key indicators in their health that made them go seek more emergency medicine. So big outcomes coming out of this program, quite frankly. Anyone have any questions about this?
Anna?
Yeah.
Hi.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So I was actually, we've received the presentation from the 3 programs that you're profiling here previously, and I was just trying to figure out why we were going back and we didn't have maybe the portfolio review of the other programs. I know it's new on those, but this will be the second time we've gone through this type of review on these programs. So you're doing it now, but the providers did it not too long ago, I think early in the first part of the year. So I was trying to figure out the purpose of going over it again. Is it just
I'll answer that.
Don't have it on the others or what?
Yeah. I'll answer that. So you mentioned the other programs. Every other program, there's 3 reasons why I wanted to do this. One is all of the programs were looked at in the same framework, using the results-based accountability framework. Now, all of the other programs have a snapshot like this as well, but as one of the purposes of pointing this out was that I've already had questions about a lot of data we'd like to have, wish we'd have, what didn't, data that's not collected, data that resides in other places. And part of the purpose was to point that out. In the past, where I came from, the Children's Commission, we had we had systems in place to collect all that because we would report to you. So part of it is really just to paint a picture of, from my perspective, that funding is hard, and when we fund these programs, it's very, very important to be crystal clear of what it is that we're measuring and what the data is we'd like to collect. So one of the things I was hoping to see is, you've had these before for these 3 programs. One of the questions would these be the outcomes you would like to see? So Commissioner Cornell's question was exactly the type of question, at least that I was hoping that would get asked, would be, well, what about the kids? And, so essentially what he was asking is, what is the theory behind coaching? Is the theory behind coaching that it ultimately leads to better outcomes for children or not? And if so, how long does that take? And so I haven't heard that conversation here in the past. If we've had that, I missed it, but I think that's important. Also, for that particular program, the type of evaluation that he wanted to see, which was what impact does the coaching have on child outcomes? Where I came from, we did that study after we had our coaching model in place. And it's a very expensive type of study to do. It can be done. But that we've done these with these three programs, you know, I would expect eventually you would see the same type of data on any program that we fund. And, you know, I think the point is that these measures were given to us from the programs, right? So are these the measures you want to see? Are these the type of things you wanted to fund in the future? If not, what are the better offs or the type of outcomes that you want to fund? And, you know, those should be the kind, in my view anyways, as policymakers, those should be the kind of questions, you know, that you are asking. Anna also did some, and I think she's going to get into that, but she said there was several questions about what did you learn about working together? What were some of the lessons learned about the programs? You know, maybe what things didn't work as far as how they were put together. So I don't want to steal her thunder, but eventually, I mean, we should see this, be able to see the same type of information across all our programs. And so that we've went through one group of programs and got a general overview. Every site, we didn't show you all 47 sites like this, but they each have a sheet that looks like this. But we should be, you know, expecting this type of information from all our programs going forward, I would think, as policymakers. And so those, the type of outcomes and things you'd want to see are where the discussion, you know, should head. So I appreciate you sitting through this part, but the next part we'll all be looking forward.
Tina, is that it?
Were there any more questions related to?
Dr. Snyder had some questions or had a question.
I don't really have a question, but I have a comment about something that I think was important for all three of those programs, and that I think as a trust we should also be thinking about what kinds of information we want moving forward. And it relates to what Colin said, and is going to talk a little bit about moving forward. But I think we want to be also thinking about capacity building within our county. So how these programs are helping to build capacity, but also how they're helping to accomplish systems change, or what I talked about a few weeks back around constructive disruption.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could trace, and we don't need to necessarily do that today, but I think you could definitely talk about the impacts that these three programs have had on the ways that the systems and the partners who have been involved are doing business differently and collaborating differently as a function of these projects, which is also, I think, an important outcome that as a trust we certainly would want to have as one of our key areas of interest.
Thank you, Pat. Karen? Dr. Cole Smith?
Okay. Let's see. So I think one of the other focuses is what I mentioned earlier, having more information as it relates to demographics.
Mm-hmm.
We've been having a lot of conversation in the community about, you know, the gaps and the disparities and the inequities as it relates to race and ethnicity. We've looked at a lot of data. We know about a lot of trends. And so if we could go back, I think one of the ways in which we could enhance what we've just reviewed is to include more information about the demographics of those that we're serving, especially because one of our major goals is to reduce those gaps and narrow those inequities.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be an added plus if we could do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any more hands. Anna, good.
Well, again, with the portfolio review, before we go on to the next section, so I did have a chance to speak with these three programs. And maybe I'll go back so we can have a high level of their programs. And thank you again. I think as we go into the next conversation, as we talk about indicators and how these align to your strategies that you fund, a big one just off the top, a lot of these contracts and scopes of services were not structured in a way that made it easy to get to these insights, right? So you would definitely want some good information up front so that there's like key questions that you know you're going to get answers to whether that's you know, an answer that you want later on. You know, so just off there was just somewhat unstructured to be given. Now, speaking of like lessons learned, just specifically because I know the most about these three programs, right? One of the challenges with funding, I think, for these programs was getting, a lot of them were 1-year contracts, at least, and then they got renewed. But for the most part, it is hard to, if you're having grant funded staff, it's hard to recruit for those types of positions. So just something to keep in mind as a lesson learned. If you're trying to get to a level of system change and you're trying to fund programs, that can be a challenge, is recruiting the right staff to those programs, because they might only be a 1-year job, right? So you might not get the most talented people, or it might be hard to recruit in general. Now, thinking about systems and collaboration, across all the programs, everybody really enjoyed having an opportunity to support each other and work towards policies that would improve reducing barriers for children and families. So I think definitely collaboration was a key theme I heard from every single program that I talked to. And that meant a lot of different things, but I think moving forward as a convening power that the Children's Trust have, that's like a big focus, I think, that would help move the needle on a lot of these things, because it seemed organic based off of the programs that were already provided, but it could be a little bit better, especially if you're bringing other partners on board that are working with the same population. So having the Early Learning Center here, you know, having the Early Learning Coalition at the table to be like, here's the data we already have on these programs. Let's help support that system in general versus kind of making it all on the program. So very focused on systems, focus on, again, I think having a good sense of what the evaluation kind of questions are before the program starts will help have a good structure moving forward. And again, the convening power that is a Children's Trust, where you can focus and change policies in a big way. Again, big lessons learned. And I think just generally the structure of the contract will be helpful to get higher quality staff, or at least reduce some vacancies. I think it would just help in general. Any others? So that's the portfolio. Does you have any other questions? I don't see anything else. All right. So the next big part of the agenda is really related to, okay, now we know what's in the portfolio. It's a baseline. Now, what do we do next, right? So that for this section, it includes, you know, recommendations. So just to give you a sense of the background, I went through all the information from the Technical Advisory Committee, and then I want to review like the RBA framework related to Turn the Curve. We're going to go over the recommended indicators and have more of a discussion related to them, and see, you know, can we approve these so that in the short term, this is something we can focus on and help turn the curve. So just as a reminder, the Technical Advisory Committee went through a robust review of available data and presented that to us in June. And they also recommended 4 result areas. So again, part of RBA is having common language. So these are the 4 result areas. All children are born healthy and remain healthy. All children can learn what they need to be successful. All children have nurturing, supportive caregivers and relationships. And all children live in a safe community. So the Technical Advisory Committee also produced these types of dashboards, and again, lots of robust data from various sources, including things by racial disparities. So what I did was take this data, and then what I did was prioritize it based off of what I would see as opportunities. And again, the idea here isn't, I think you can often get what I call paralysis by analysis, right? So what is the result we're trying to get? And then when you think of turn the curve, in order to answer the first question, which is how are we doing, you need to have a sense of, you know, what's that first data point to look at? What's an indicator for our community related to that result? So this is the kind of discussion I want us to have so that we can move the curve, but we really need to start with step 1. And we can't start with step 1 without having a sense of like, where is a priority that I need to look. I can look at 3,000 different indicators, but it won't give me a sense of what are some bigger opportunities I might be seeing. And again, go through that where we are within that story. So keeping this in mind, the turn to curve, I'm not looking at a robust scorecard for the whole county. I'm looking for opportunities to turn the curve. And that's what I did, thinking of these 4 different result areas. And so just so you have a sense of like the relationship between these indicators and how it affects program strategy, I pulled this chart, which is this is part of like RBA as well. So in the ultimate, way we're trying to do, the result area is, we're trying to change something at the population level, right? But the way most funding works is in what I call like the yellow shaded area, right? And so even though I want to get to the result of all children are born healthy and remain healthy, the indicator I might use for that, because I'm using it as a proxy, is infant death rate per 1,000 births, right? It will give me an indicator that I'm working towards improving children's health, right? And a performance measure at the program level will be new mothers that reside, receive newborn home visiting. So in the like very strategic framework, you do want your result and your indicators highly aligned to performance measures at the program and agency level, right? And again, it's very rare that you get to total population level metrics, but if you build indicators that help support them overall, then you can fund programs and strategies that help you get to there. So based off of what we saw in the portfolio review, you'll see for the most part, there isn't a heavy alignment right now. We have a little bit of a scattershot. So we need to get to a point where what are some indicators we do need to work on turning the curve on so that we can prioritize the types of funding strategies that can help turn the curve, right? So that's what I worked on, trying to help provide that level of information. So how did I prioritize the indicators that I included in today's discussion, right? So I did use the RVA framework of the 3 common metrics, which is proxy power. Does this indicator say something of central importance about the result, right? So if all children are healthy, is that a good proxy, right? Is infant mortality a good proxy for that indicator, right? Communication power. Does this indicator communicate to a broad range of audiences? Data power. Is the quality of data ready on a timely basis? There were lots of issues with making sure we had timely data, so that I only picked indicators where I had data available to us. Did I see a big trend, negative trend, or a big variance based on either disparities between the county or race? Is that an opportunity we're seeing? So that's in addition to the typical like RBA where you're doing proxy communication and data power. I added a 4th, which is a negative trend. And then a population metric. Does it affect a large percentage of the population, either the age group or the sort of people? So again, I took these areas as a guide, went through all of the data that was recommended by the technical advisory committee, and so that we could get a sense of what are some priority opportunities of indicators to help us have a better discussion related to turning the curve. Any questions on the prioritization method? Oh, perfect. Okay, so first off, the first result area, again, we're just trying to keep common language together. So this is the result, and I'm calling them turn to curve indicators. Okay, so the idea for the result, again, I went through that different framework of like, do I think I have proxy communication, data power, negative trend, or affecting a large percentage of the population? So these are the 4 indicators I'm recommending to help us focus on turning the curve related to all children are born healthy and remain healthy. So the first indicator is infant mortality, right? If you can see from this graph, this is data from the Florida Health charts. The data in gray, you can see that as a county, we're in the worst quartile. We're in the 4th quartile. So statistically, there's a big gap between infant mortality in our county versus others in the state. And you look at the race data, we see big racial gaps, particularly with infants that are Black and other races. There's a gap there where more children that are of that race are dying in infancy than in other places. So that's a rationale behind that data point and that indicator, and why we're recommending it for that result.
May I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
the data that you just showed us, if you go back to it, there were certain years when it looked like that 2008, 2011, where it dovetailed and it looked like it was down pretty much with the state average. Was there any analysis as to what went on those years, on those or the other years where it seems like it dips down? Well done, or is that just it's just what happened those particular years?
I don't know offhand. No, I didn't dive into, every single piece of the data because I was trying to keep a focus on like trend level. But we could look into it to get a sense of like the story behind the data. I think the most important thing is it's trending in a negative way based on multiple years. And we are statistically worse off than the rest of the state. And we have big racial gaps, right? I don't know the story as to why it's gone up so much, right? But I think that's when we start getting to turn the curve, right? We say, right now we're trying to identify an opportunity, right? We do know that there is an opportunity here, right? And it is a good proxy, I think, for childhood health. But at the same time, when we start going along the curve, what's the story behind the data? What other partner? Who else is working on this? That part would come next. But the first part is always what's the opportunity? And I think this is a good opportunity to dive into, like your point, like we would want to know, hey, what was going on in 2008? Like, why were we doing better than the state? Like, what has changed? Is there a policy change? Has there been something different that would help inform strategy?
Well, if we're going to do that analysis at some point, that's fine. But if we're just going, because I agree, this is something that's important.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess where I'm heading with this is I would hope that we would see what happened in those years, simply because if they did something that was effective, let's not try to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I think.
And thank you.
I think
Continue on.
I think it's part of the conversation, though, like being, hey, what is going on? Or as a blip, it could be sometimes, could be just a blip.
And Dr. Hart may have the answer to this. Dr. Hart.
Hi, everybody. I'm really a total data nerd when it comes to infant mortality, and I can tell you that the population of our county is so small that we can't look at yearly numbers. One set of preemie triplets will make this bounce all over the place. So the data in Florida charts for us to look at is 3-year rolling averages. It will smooth out all these ups and downs. And I think what you're going to see is that infant mortality is trending down a little bit. But what I am seeing looking at all of the infant outcome data is that low birth weight is trending up. And low birth weight is sort of a surrogate for maternal stress. And I think we need, whenever Karen Cole Smith raises her hand and says, give me the demographics or something like that, I think we need to just pause and take 3 deep breaths and listen to what she's saying. Because if you look at low birth weight between African-American and Latinos and whites, you'll see a huge spread. And so I think our goal ought to be to minimize that differential rather than to try to reach the Healthy People 2020 or 2030 goal or whatever it is right now. I think we need to narrow that gap. And if we are not serious as a trust about narrowing that gap, then we're just leaving our community high and dry. That is the problem. That is the problem. And that's why our group, when we met in the first few years before we had the trust, we became very interested in early childhood investment, very interested in changing systems around early childhood. That's why we created and funded the 3 programs we did. And I think it was Dr. Snyder who said, we still need to know what they learned from working together across those programs, because if we want to change the system, we cannot look at programs one by one. We have to look at groups of programs. So So I would suggest alternative measures for us to track and trend over time.
But so Dr. Hart, just so I think that's, great advice to think of the racial disparities, because for sure we're seeing that 100% with even the infant death mortality. But I think we can spend a lot of time trying to hone in on the perfect indicator. So I would say, could we pick an indicator that is a proxy for maternal health? And what would be the best one? Because that would help advise strategies, right? Because there are different programs and different strategies that will help, but the indicator is for a bigger system, right?
I think the best indicator is low birth weight births.
Okay.
I'm looking to, my machine is a little slow to raise my hand.
No problem.
So if no one else will speak, I'm not sure who just said that. I think that was that Dr. Hart, but I wanted to maybe chime in, because when we are looking at infant mortality and making sure that children are born healthy and remain healthy, if we really don't stratify it by race, we're going to be reaching, I think, folks who are receiving really good prenatal care, don't have stressors and all of that. So in order to change the system, to disrupt the system, we really need to get at the root cause, or see if we can address those things that unfortunately are along racial lines. Yeah. We're seeing those. So I'm not sure who said that earlier, and that she thinks we should change the indicator. I agree with that person with that. I think when I looked at something recently on NPR, about maternal women who die in childbirth, and how it was so high for African-American women. It made me wonder how I made it through with 2 children pregnant. And I had one, my first one was Frank Breach. And so I think if we, and it didn't matter even if you had high income, if you were not poor. Like, these are not, some folks were African-American mothers that were having poor outcomes. It was not because they were indigent that they didn't have health insurance. They had really good health insurance and just were seen to have somehow received subpar medical treatment. So I think, or were ignored and didn't get a good treatment. So I think we kind of got to maybe stratify this method into where we are really honing in on and trying to get to the root cause of that one demographic, so that those children are born healthy, and that they stay healthy, because that is going to be important to even their schooling outcomes, which is really important to me.
Right.
Children that are born premature, low birth weight, with health issues tend to have other medical issues that impede their learning later on.
So the recommendation offhand is for an indicator related to maternal and infant health that focuses heavily on the racial disparity, right? So we want an indicator that shows that, and that's the indicator we want to move. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's my view, I think, yeah. I mean, you have the overall rate, but I think we have to really get to that at the that racial.
Right. So if we were looking at, say, this one, which is infant deaths, right? It is breaking out by race in this case. So say 2015, the racial for infants that were Black or other races, they're saying was, I think, around 15 per 1,000 live births versus, I can't see the full chart here, but obviously there's racial disparities between the two.
Just because I'm taking notes, do we have the, we might not be able to have it here, but do we have the birth weight data, and is that stratified by Florida?
Colin, this was Maggie. We had that. That was one that we had as part of the data set that we looked at initially. But, I defer to Dr. Hart, who certainly can tell us which one as a physician is more indicative. But then I agree with Tina and with Nancy about the disparity is the thing we've got to close.
Right.
The gap, it's the gap.
Okay. I think that's good recommendation.
Change it.
Yep, we can change it. That's what we're here for. The idea is to find indicators that give us opportunities, right, to have strategies, right? So again, these were, prioritized based off of those indicators, but the discussion is more important. So I think we're going to put the newborn, the healthy birth weights based on race as the indicator. And I can pull that data, I'm sure we have it, and we can make that the indicator.
And Ken Cornell wants to chime in.
Sure, go ahead.
Very quickly, just I concur with Dr. Hart and what I heard from Tina. On the and remain healthy, do we have average weights at 1 year, 2 years? Is that data available?
I would not know. Does anybody?
This is Maggie. It was there is data in those Florida charts on obesity rates by age group.
I was talking about kids and birth and when they were born, and then
I mean,
like
trending after they were born, do they? Yeah, I don't remember seeing any of that. Nancy would know if that data is out there.
Because I mean, to Nancy's point, we can measure the ones that don't make it, but born healthy and remain healthy is, I think, much more in line with birth weight and then continued care after they're born. So I don't know if that data is available. I'll defer to y'all.
So this is Nancy. As far as connecting the dots, I think the best birth-related stat is births less than 2,500 grams. You can get that by race on Florida charts.
Mhm.
And figure out if those children remain healthy. That's a really good question. I might need to sleep on it, but I don't think self-inflicted injuries is what we want, because kids are pretty old by the time they're committing suicide, and we don't really know very much about suicidal ideation and threats and success in Alachua County. The best way to get at that would be the Youth Behavioral Risk Factor Survey, which is given to middle schoolers and high schoolers. That's something that I advocated to the Technical Advisory Committee at one meeting. And I think we can return to that, but that's going to be way in the future before we get that data. But I think there are things we could do. For example, child abuse and neglect is highest in children between the ages of 0 and 1, and it's highest between the ages of 0 and 5. And most of the children who are born healthy but do not remain healthy are not healthy because their families are not able to provide their Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we already are funding some things, 2 things that were just reviewed by Anna that have to do with providing concrete family supports. I think those are important, but we don't know to what extent there are racial divides there and whether there are more needs that are not met at this time. So if you'll let me think about this, maybe give me 24 or 48 hours, a remain healthy child outcome, I think we can come up with something that's already on Florida charts that we do not need to gather.
But for now, we definitely want, the healthy baby weights by race to track. I think that's a good recommendation from the group. Now, the second one, which maybe Dr. Hart we can talk about, because there's more indicators for maltreatment and child abuse in the second result, which is focused for, actually might be, caring families. So focusing on the other.
And I apologize. When you're done with this section, I'm going to open it up to the other than just the panelists. So when you're done with your presentation for the first, the first of the objectives, let me know and we'll open it up to everybody.
Okay. Perfect.
Thank you. I'm done.
So so for this result, there are 4 that I've recommended right now, right? So infant mortality, we said we're going to sub that out with a better indicator related to infant weight, healthy birth weights, right, by race. Now the next one I wanted to talk about was hospitalization for self-inflicted injuries from 12 to 18. And Dr. Hart mentioned that she didn't think we have enough high quality data related to that have root cause. But it's something I think is an opportunity because the adolescents, there's a big trend related to this. So there might be an opportunity to dive more into it. I leave that up to discussion. Right now, that's a big disparity and a trend is negative. Thinking about adolescents and self-inflicted injuries.
And yeah, so the data of self-inflicted injuries have become a growing problem. It is probably related to that and the threat thereof are the leading causes of people being Baker acted. There is data on youth Baker acts. It's available through Florida Mental Health Institute at USF. It includes data that are school-based law enforcement Baker acts, which we know is a problem. There's a huge rise in the number of children that are Baker acted, but it doesn't tease out very well, I don't think, which kids are Baker acted with a real mental health problem or they're a behavior problem. There's some other issue because so many of them are sourced through law enforcement. So in self-injurious behavior, 12 to 18 is the age range that's reported. It is a huge trend, not just in this area. It is a huge trend in this area statewide and nationally. So I think it's probably the cleanest indicator of a very severe mental health crisis in a child that we're going to get. It's not overall total child mental health well-being, Nancy, I agree, until we can get the youth survey implemented more broadly, which is down the road, we won't have a really good indicator. I'm loath to use Baker Act because I think it's skewed by so many other contaminants. So I would support leaving this one in.
I think we do need some sort of indicator for mental health, particularly with adolescents. I think there needs to be something. I'm just looking at for the profiles for the county, it does seem like an opportunity to support. Whether it's self-inflicted injuries or if it's Baker acts, does everybody agree that we need an indicator related to this?
Yes.
All right, anybody else?
I guess this is Nancy. I guess I think there's a big gap between birth and age 12 to 18. We need to find something for that earlier age.
And unfortunately, I'm trying to recall, I haven't looked at the Baker Act data in the last couple months. I don't think they segmented other than youth and adult. So it wouldn't break out. We may want to go back to Florida charts and see if they do self-injury for any of the earlier groups and just make it self-injury. And then when we look at the data and dive into it to write RFPs, we can look at age groups. I mean, I can tell you just from experience that we've had children Baker acted for suicidal ideation as young as 5.
Wow.
And not like once a year, but not every day, not every week, but certainly more than people I think would think. It's transient. I mean, it's an impulse thing, as with most of those kinds of episodes with kids. But a baseline level of depression in even young children is definitely something that we see. It's just very hard to get at, and there's not. Who collects that data, right? There isn't a consistent population-wide hospitalization, at least is. So I think what I would recommend is that we look to see if there's data on hospitalizations for self-injury. And this is even flawed because it doesn't collect non-hospitalized self-injury, right? That doesn't require an admission, but there's just very little clean data on youth mental health because there has been such huge opposition to screening for it universally. That's a political system change issue, frankly.
But there's definitely an opportunity.
So Nancy, for the gap, I'm thinking about, you're probably thinking this too, but I'm thinking about what CSHS Children's Special Health Services might be collecting that picks kids up from DOE who are low birth weight, right? And then who are referred for services through CSHS. So, and the national survey data that they have to complete every year around children's health in the state of Florida. So just as something, there might be something in those data that are collected on an ongoing basis that could help fill in the gap about going to Lee's question about what's the longitudinal follow-up in terms of health for those low birth weight babies. Because as you and I both know, it quickly turns not only to health, but developmental, long-term outcomes. But from the health perspective, I think those kids would be captured within CSHS, those kids who need ongoing continualized special care if they, don't have good neonatal outcomes.
I don't see anything, so go ahead.
Okay. So the next recommended indicator was related to bacterial STDs, again, for the adolescent age group of 15 to 19. Just seeing the big gaps, again, worse off in the quartile. I think this, tends to show quality of prevention programs available in the county. High youth development programs, high quality youth development programs tend to help prevent lots of these risk factors, essentially. So, and we see, again, big racial disparities, particularly with Black non-Hispanic teens in the health related for bacterial STDs. Any questions or comments about this indicator? Thinking about it as a good proxy indicator for kind of healthy behaviors or, risk adverse behaviors, again, for biracial ethnicity as well.
Tart?
I like this indicator in a way, but the problem is we have a systemic issue in Alachua County. We don't do comprehensive sex ed in our school system. At least we didn't last time I checked. So we have a system change that we could make, and we could do the youth behavioral risk factor survey, and that would give us a lot of information about sexually transmitted infections in children.
I mean, I think it's a good proxy. Again, anyone else have any comments? Keep it in. Keep it in. All right, move on. All right. This one I included, which wasn't included in the technical advisory committee, but looking at the data for the state, and again, the result area, I thought it was important to include this one because it affects, 1 in 5 children. We're talking about food insecurity in the county, and the state is the same. That's a big part of the community, and it's getting worse as the COVID pandemic occurs. It's becoming more and more of an issue. So I included it thinking of the result. I thought it was important to include.
And my question would be, how does that coordinate? I know that it's a big thing for the county as well. And so how does that, it seems like there could be some coordination there.
Well, I would say we're not talking about funding strategies. I'm talking about opportunities, right? So you might not be doing direct services related to it, but you could help support it, right? Or other partners helping you support it, maybe in all your after school programs. If you had after school programs, you would make sure that they had supporting parents and families with food insecurity. It is not necessarily a strategy, but I think it's an important indicator when looking at health of children.
I totally agree. Maybe we get Ken to chime in on here, but I know that the commission, this is one of the things that's important to them as well.
Yeah.
So we talk about coordination. It would seem like we can keep this as an indicator because obviously it's important, but I think that we would have a number of partners with that. So.
Right.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Lee. This is an area where when our CAP funding kind of rewrite next year, the trust ought to be going to the commission saying this is one of our indicators and this is where we need you to lean in and help us from a funding standpoint. And same with, from the school board with regards to free and reduced lunches and whatever services are provided to our kids at school and are continuing to be provided right now.
Nancy, this is said in jest. Our information nerd would like to chime in here.
I was just going
She has her hand raised.
how do we ascertain that children are food insecure? What's the data behind it?
I think they do a survey, like a phone survey from what I know. I think that's how this data is collected typically across the state. I'm not 100% sure, but it tends to lag. And I know there are, like, Feeding America collects better data on it. but it wasn't at the county level.
We probably should look at what feeding programs the county has been doing since March and try to tie that data into the most recent, because there's been a lot of organizational support both at the county and within the community to provide food.
And I can tell you the numbers applying for the food assistance programs through DCF have exponentially gone up the last few months. And I talk regularly with the food banks, and all of them have said that their access has gone up too with the economic issues people are experiencing during COVID.
I think it's important for us to remember with the results-based accountability that this is a high-level measure that we're going to be looking at, and that there's data and other measures and partnerships that get identified as telling the story and fleshing out what the indicator really means and how to, and suggesting then what kinds of strategies would bend that curve. So this is a high-level indicator to us that there are issues that address it. I mean, if you want to talk about childhood obesity or kids being a normal weight,
right,
this is one of the key factors in that. So I think a lot of this, we just need to remember that these are very high. What are the highest level measures that help us understand and communicate how well our children are doing? Not necessarily the specific measures that lie behind it, or that we're going to be able to determine how to intervene from.
Yeah. You wanted to say something?
Did you say me? Sorry.
Tina Certain had her hand up.
Yeah. Okay.
I took it down. I was wondering, I like the indicator. I'm just wondering if it would be something that we can gather data on to really do an objective measurement on it. That was what my question was. But after Cheryl chimed in, and maybe there is some objective measures there. And I mean, for us, the school lunch program, I think most of the schools, except for like 3, I think in our county, are everyone eats free regardless of income level. So I think this past school year, and Superintendent Clark can confirm this, but if I'm not mistaken, I think it's just 3 schools in the district that did not qualify under, and I'm trying to think of the name of the program, is CEP or CPE or something like that. All of the children eat free in the schools, so they don't even do a free and reduced lunch application for that, but at those schools. So I'm wondering if we can really measure food insecurity, if it's just going to be primarily just if there's a grocery store within a certain distance for where their household is or something like that. I'm not sure if we can get info for it, but if we can, that's good. I'm just,
This is Colin.
Yes.
The Break Spot program, the summer Break Spot program, publishes a meal gap every year by zip code. You may not like the way they calculate it, but what they do is they compare the number of summer meals delivered in a zip code with, I think it's SNAP benefits, if I'm not mistaken, and what the gap and what they believe the meal gap is for that zip code. So that is one measure. It may not be the best, but it is one way to get it by zip code of what you think a meal gap might be. The summer Break Spot program serves kids 0 to 18, so there are different proxy measures that could give you an idea, even down to geographic levels on what you think it might be that we could look at.
Okay. But for now, I think food insecurity is a good indicator, but we'll look into better data sources for the county. I think that's a good recommendation because it's probably more robust. Sound good for now, everyone?
Yes.
Thumbs up? Perfect. So those were the indicators related to all children are born healthy and remain healthy. We're gonna adopt the bottom 3 for now for hospitalizations and self-inflicted injuries, bacterial STDs, child food insecurity, and we're gonna update the infant mortality indicator so that it focuses on racial disparities in healthy birth weights. That's what we discussed. Sounds good?
And
Okay.
we're going to look to see if you can get self-inflicted to a lower age range.
Perfect. And self-inflicted to a lower age range. Thank you. Would you like to open
I'm going.
comments?
Yeah. Thank you. And Anna, you just tell us if you need to take a break, because this is the first of 4. So if you need to take a break, we can, we'll pause. Okay.
I'm totally fine.
The first question is from Ms. Houchin. Deidre?
Great, thank you. I was unmuting. You can hear me now, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I have a few comments, so bear with me. I want to take us back to the kind of overall, the first half of the presentation on what the Children's Trust is funding and who those target audiences are. And I crunched a bit of numbers. So they're loose. Forgive me for them not being precise. But what I found and wanted to report back to the trust based on what was presented and Dr. Cole-Smith's question is right now about 14.7% of Alachua County's children are involved in weekly services that are funded by the trust, given a population of about 44,000, which is the research we did for the Youth Development Research Practice Partnership. So that's the first number. 14% are involved in weekly services. Now, when I think about weekly services, I think about specifically the kinds of activities that school age and teenage children need. That they absolutely need weekly services. It can't be, you know, occasional or a one-time event to really be to positively impact their development. So given the numbers that were provided, I tried to understand a bit better what we're funding and what percentage of the population as well as funding dollars are going to which audiences. And this is what I came up with and I wanted to make you aware of. It seems about 40% of Alachua County's early learning childhood population is being funded by the trust at about 40% of the funding. It seems as though 30% of Alachua County's elementary population is currently being funded by the trust at around 10% of the funding. And that depends on whether or not we're considering weekly or occasional funding. So I'm not quite sure about those numbers, but that does seem to be generally right given the weekly services number. It seems about 30% of the middle school population is being served by the trust at only 8% of the funding. And here's the number that was very scary for me, is that it seems as though, Solomon, you have to be quiet right now. It seems as though only 8%, somewhere between 8 to 12% of Alachua County's high school population is being given services, and it's only about 3% of the funding. So I wanted to draw that, you know, as we're thinking about these results and these indicators, making sure that we're evenly covering the parts of our population who really need services seem to first be critical. That seems to be something that we need to identify and have some metrics around. And then second, I would suggest that thinking about equity-based metrics for subpopulations are also critical. I don't want the indicators we have to be what drives funding agendas instead of what we know children need to drive the funding agenda. And I know that that's, you know, I'm just underscoring that. I know that that's not what we're thinking about, but I am concerned as a member of that technical advisory committee that a number of the indicators that we suggested that we would like to have were actually much better proxies for children's healthy development than the data we have available that get at access to services, as well as what Dr. Snyder was talking about with regard to a systems level view and the building of capacity. So my questions are, one, to what extent are we attempting to weave in those indicators that we would like to have and start calculating that data, start requiring that data on a county level. And the final comment I would make is that I just want to be very clear that the indicators that we're looking at, every single one of them, essentially are saying how many children are on fire, how many children are completely unsuccessful in the current system. And I'd like us to move away from that kind of risk-based framework that was used to collect these state and federal level data for, you know, two decades or so, to more resilience and development-based data that we might have to be pioneers to get at that data, but that's actually what's going to help us build healthy children instead of just being able to see which ones are absolutely in dire straits.
Thank you, Dr. Hatch. Appreciate it. Miss Libby?
Lee, real quick before we move on, can we ask Dr. Halcyon to email us how she calculated those percentages?
Yes, that'd be fine. And if she would be kind enough to come up with the how she came about it, that would be very helpful. Is that okay, Ms. Houchin?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Libby? Okay, all right. And I guess it's okay to start for the next one.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for that feedback. So the next result we're going to go over, again, the second one is related to all children can learn what they need to be successful. Within them, I looked at opportunities within 3 indicators. So children are ready for kindergarten, 3rd grade reading levels, and high school graduation rates. For these indicators, I also included them for like different races if I had it available to us. So the first one is, are children ready for kindergarten? This is from the Florida Department of Education. We know 57% of Alachua County children are considered ready for kindergarten based on the kindergarten assessments. I think that one's a general one that everybody agrees that we should include. Any discussions on that one? I'm not sure if this data is available by race. So that's something I think to keep in mind too, is we should, if it is available by race, we should include it. I believe it is. The next indicator is childhood, 3rd grade reading levels based on the FSA scores. So this is, we're looking at big disparities with particularly children that are Black. 33% of Black children in Alachua County are considered at the passing score rate, which is a 3 or higher. And the county average was 57 in the latest year that the data points. So again, big gaps with different races in the county. And we have them at the 3 or higher, which is considered, you know, passing score. But a 3 tends to also indicate like they might need more support in the next year. A 4 means that they're thriving. I think it tends to be a higher level. So it's even, the gap is even bigger when you look at a 4 or higher, which is 8% for Black children in the county for getting that on their 3rd grade reading scores. And then the racial, high school graduation rates, which is trending positively in general, which is good. But we're seeing 80% of Black youth graduating versus 88% in the county. And big gaps between the blue color, which I'm trying to block, is Asian, and I think white is right below it, which is around the 88%. Any questions about these 3 indicators? I think for the most part, these are the ones that people are used to seeing when you're talking about children, our children learning. I think it would be good to see the kindergarten one by race. So I think we should include that one if we have that data. And then 3rd grade reading levels, again, also by race, and high school graduation rates by race. Any discussions?
I'm sorry, I tried to look at this is Pat Lee. Can I I tried to
Yeah,
push
go
the
ahead.
hand, but it's not
No
working.
That's
Um,
fine.
I just want to echo what Dr. Houchin said about these indicators and what came forward from the technical advisory group about putting the talent that we have in this community together to think about over time what other indicators we might be able to substitute in this particular area. I don't want to dwell for hours on measurement and other issues that I'm a nerd around, but I can tell you that there are many issues with the kindergarten readiness assessment in this state, and it's like a volleyball that goes back and forth and sometimes times out in the sand and gets stuck. And so the data from year to year are not necessarily comparable. So there are lots and lots and lots of issues around it. And I think that we want to make sure that although we're using it right now, we want to think outside the box a little bit moving forward around these.
Any more discussion around indicators for this result?
Before we get into the next one, I screwed up and I'm learning about all this, and part of it was the chat function. And Miss Elaine Donahue wrote a few suggestions for the health, the last indicators, and that would be, and I'm not sure who, and this is for anybody who can answer it. It says, do you have data for percentage of well child visits actually kept? It reflects the immunization and weight gain. I would think that would be very hard that information would be very hard to come by because it goes in for HIPAA and all that kind of stuff. The second one says, it does seem that self-inflicted injury and STDs population, and it would be better to look at younger children if you want to see the impact of your programs. I think that was a comment more than a question. And the last one says childhood obesity reflects the quality of nutrition, availability and health and healthy physical activity, and is loosely related to mental health. Would that be a good measure? So the last one I'll throw out to, whether we want to include that. And I apologize for not seeing that sooner.
Any more?
The vaccination rate data we looked at, I believe, in the committee, and we didn't rise to the top as an indicator because Alachua County numbers were pretty high, and we didn't feel like it would differentiate very much or say very much, but we did look at vaccination rates.
Okay.
Any more discussion? It seems like these are indicators for this result that we could use. Okay.
Well, go ahead. That's okay. I'll hold it.
Okay, the third result is focused on all children have nurturing, supportive caregivers and relationships. There are 3 indicators it's recommending. So the first one was children subject to maltreatment, youth rest, and children in foster care were the 3 indicators recommended for. And the first one, actually got this data there was quite a bit of data that the technical advisory committee had on child abuse and child maltreatment verifications. The only issue I had with it was that it was kind of like weekly data. It didn't give me like a good sense of like a trend or like a ranking as like, at least for me, like I like a robust indicator that gives me something to compare to so I can see what the story is. So I got this data from Fostering Court Improvement, and this is ranks the county based on the rates per population. So this is children subject to maltreatment reports, and compared to other counties in Florida, we are ranked 28th, where like you basically you want to be on the better side. So the best would be Miami-Dade, and then the worst would be, I think, Franklin County is what we're seeing here. So this is, again, children subject to maltreatment reports. So a proxy for, child abuse and other prevention of those things. And again, this is the only reason I pulled this one. I just thought it was a more robust indicator versus the weekly reports that were coming from the dashboard. Any questions about this one? I think
Nancy Hart, her hand up. Dr. Hart?
Yes, am I unmuted now?
Yeah.
I have two things. One is our child maltreatment in Alachua County has actually, this is getting back to Anna's comment about trended data, has actually changed a little bit how we assess maltreatment reports. And maybe Cheryl Twombly could chime in if I say something stupid here, but my understanding of it is that some years ago, we actually had a systems change in the way we handled maltreatment reports, in that a report did not generate a confirmed child maltreatment designation until investigators went to the home and actually provided families with certain concrete family supports that were needed to mitigate child neglect. And we've had really superb success in Alachua County reducing confirmed cases of child abuse and neglect because of this systems change. And I want to emphasize that systems change is what we want, what we need, and what will really turn these curves. So even though Alachua County still looks like it's above our dotted line there, I'm pretty sure Cheryl Twombly may contribute that it's much better than it was. And I also, before Cheryl chimes in, I wanted to respond to Dr. Houchin's calculations that we're underfunding school-age children, especially middle and high school-age children, because don't forget that our statute requires us to use these dollars for activities outside of the school day. And I think before we conclude that we are not spending enough money on high school age children, we need to look at how much money the school system is paying on after school activities for high school age children. In other words, all the coaches, all of the after school clubs that have teachers or other supervisory personnel present, we have not counted up those dollars and cents. So I think if Dr. Houchin had been with us from the beginning, she might have arrived at the same conclusion we did, is that there really are not very many tax dollars going to early childhood. It's not till children enter the school system that our tax dollars begin to consider their needs. But as we learned in our review of literature, if we don't attend to early childhood brain development, children don't necessarily thrive in kindergarten and beyond. So what we tried to do with our early funding decisions, which are based on early childhood, is do everything we could to see whether we could improve the system of preschool age children.
And what I would add to this is I think this is all maltreatment reports. We have found that it's not, well, this is an indicator that there is an issue in a family. Verified maltreatment reports are actual abuse was determined. And I think this report is just showing how many reports came in, which are not, you know, this is still an indicator of something. There is something in this family that's maybe going wrong, but it may not be maltreatment. So I think this is a high level indicator of, you know, an issue in a family, but I think we may want to look at verified maltreatment versus this.
Okay. So offhand but we do want some sort of indicator related to child abuse to help serve, right? Whether it's verified or just reports, correct?
Yes.
I would think so.
And that's an opportunity for the county. Everybody think that's an opportunity? Okay. Just to make sure. Having experts on the call is wonderful. So the next indicator related to all children having nurturing and supportive caregivers and relationships, I put was youth arrest. For this one, there's big gaps between the county and Florida. and it puts it in the third quartile. I believe the technical advisory committee had put this in safe community, but I thought this was actually a better indicator for supportive caregivers and relationships, because youth tend to, like, there's lots of diversion and prevention programs that prevent youth arrest that focus on healthy relationships at home and things of that nature, or in quality after school programs or out of school time programs and things like that. So I thought youth arrests was an opportunity to consider for this result. Questions or feedback related to youth arrests as an indicator?
Dr. Snyder wants to get into the conversation.
Is the only, I mean, are there other indicators under this particular, I looked through this ahead of time, but are there other ones being suggested for this one as well?
Well, yes, one more, foster care youth. Those are, there are three, for child abuse, youth arrest, and foster care were the three for this result.
Yeah, so I think that when we had and again, the technical advisory group members, who some of whom are in the audience, but some of whom are on the Children's Trust, can probably speak to, if you look at this one, for example, you see that these data are from ages 5 to 11. And so, again, I think what we want to see is, there are data available for the number of, if we can find data around the numbers of children who have stable caregivers in the first year of their life, which turns out to be one of the strongest predictors of long-term success on multiple levels. And so I worry about a high-level indicator that doesn't start until age 5 around nurturing and responsive relationships, going back to Dr. Hart's earlier comment about everything we know from brain science about the first 3 years of life. And the importance of nurturing supportive caregivers and relationships, particularly throughout the lifespan, but no more important than during the first 3 years of life.
Is there that's like a one that we'd want to measure though, right? Is there available data on that?
Yeah, that data should be available from DCF by age group. And I'm not sure whether it'll do, how young that first, it may be 0 to 5. I don't remember how it's broken out. Patty Carroll probably can tell us if Cheryl doesn't know off the top of her head.
But Maggie and Nancy, don't you think that that's a better
yeah, I agree.
Indicator than 5 to 11, 5 years too late?
I agree.
Just so I understand the indicator, it's children who have a stable caregiver. Is that the indicator?
Yeah, so the result is that all children have nurturing, supportive caregivers. So children in foster care from an earlier age is important to understand at what point that happens. And so, and I think
you just want, all right, so foster care youth as a broader age range.
Right, but I think I think that Dr. Snyder's point is that we need to have it so that we can see the age bands if those are available.
Right. Okay.
So that would be something we need to check. And I think this is another one where race is an important one too, because children under foster care at disproportionate rates based on race, and the same thing for arrest. So I think for those, we need it by race, and this one by age as well. But younger segments.
Younger segments.
I think we need to look at, see where I guess back to the whole gap issue. I think we need to take a look at where Alachua County's rate is the worst, or is there an opportunity at each different age range? And that's a refinement. So it may be that the global indicator is all of them, but when we look and dig deep to the story, we need to look at what the age bands are where the kids are going into care.
Okay. So for foster care in particular.
Does Pat and Nancy, does that make sense to you?
Yes. Again, I think with the caveat that, we might not have the perfect indicators out there right now, but we might be able to figure out how to gather some of these data long-term as a community. But I think all of us, have heard about the importance of this is the game changer from birth to age 3. This is the game changer.
And Tina Certain has been very patient. So,
And I don't want to discount from birth to age 3 because I think that is an important period of time. And this goes back to, I wasn't going to say this about when you said the amount of money that's been spent on the older students. There are supplements that are spent or paid to coaches and things like that, but there are a lot of activities that are after school, sporting, band, and all of that are super expensive and that a lot of children don't participate in because of the expense of them. So I don't want us to lose sight of that. And yeah, there is some investment by the school district in supplements paid to coaches, and I would guess, teachers and those who act as advisors over clubs and things like that. But there are a lot of students I know with band that it's cost prohibitive. And then what we have with some students as well that are not reading on grade level, they don't get band in middle school because a lot of them are taking intensive reading, so they don't have an elective. And if you don't have band in middle school, you usually won't have band in high school. And so then that would possibly push the females to like color guard or something like that. But color guard and band are two of the most expensive things on campus for fair share for parents. It is insanely expensive. So while that is I would say it's something we could look into, but I don't want to think that, I understand also that the state statute says the school district can't get money. I'm not saying that, but I do think we should not just look at what we're paying to adults to oversee and input into the lives of a few people who do have the economic means to participate in sporting events. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Tina. Judge Wilson Bullard. Judge Bullard.
You might be muted. Hey, Lee, just until she comes on, there was a Patty Carroll made a comment in the chat about foster care. So she may, if you see that, it just, when you get back to it.
Thank you. And there was also 2 questions. One was request to, I guess, Colin, would you please post the advisory committee report on the Children's Trust website? And the other one is actually the last one. You add race and income level to the indicator on food insecurity.
And I don't know, Mr. Chair, if you can hear me now. Unfortunately, I'm dealing with some internet issues today.
Okay.
And so this may have already been mentioned, but I wanted to ask that we include an age range on the arrest and also race, so we can assess for racial disparity in the arrest as well.
Well, there are a lot of brilliant people on this panel, and they brought it up, and you're right there with them. So thank y'all very much for that. Okay, Anna, you want to continue?
Back to this for these indicators related to the result, we're going to update all of them based off of race and also the widest age groups available so that we can look at them by those 3 areas. And
Patty's on, so she may be able to address what ages the data is available for. Patty just chatted that she's now available. She had been she'd been on Facebook and not the live, so you might want to see if she can answer the question about how young the data is available for.
Oh, okay. Do we know how young the foster care data goes into? I think that was the question.
Yes,
Ms. Carroll,
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Sorry about that. Yes, so on the, and Cheryl can speak to this too, I know, but on the Department of Children and Families dashboard site, which is most of the data that we turned in through the the Technical Advisory Committee, that has data broken out for maltreatments and for youth and foster care for all ages 0 to 18. It also shows demographics, gender, race, and we can get pretty detailed with all of that. So we have a lot of information available to us.
Perfect. Great. But these are 3.
Thank you.
That's great. So now, so at least we know these are 3 indicators that we want to focus on, and we'll get more detailed data based on race and age which is great. Okay. Now
Are you
for,
ready to open up?
Yeah,
You ready to open up to, no, you're not there at the end of it. So go ahead. I'm sorry, Anna.
that was it for this result. I believe we are
Okay.
with
Okay.
these 3 indicators, but we're going to hone in on the data so that we have the broadest age ranges and more specific data for race.
Okay, well, we have a few attendees that would like to chime in, and that first one, Miss Sunshine Moss.
Hello, hi, this is Dr. Sunshine Moss. My comments were actually related to the second indicator, but on this one, I have some thoughts that maybe things that should be included would be children with incarcerated parents and also parent education level as an indicator of, the capacity through which, parents can support their children. I know maternal education level usually has a direct relationship with children's school outcomes, which brings us to number 2. And related to number 2, would it be possible to go back to those, or would that be like too far back?
That's fine. Go ahead. If I missed you, so go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pinkinson. So what the data we have here using elementary reading scores is a pretty good proxy, and it gives us a global overall view that there's an issue. But part of the issue here is that reading itself is really complicated. And so it's hard to get at a specific measurement. However, what we need in terms of understanding the issue better and even developing a template or rubric for further funding cycles for the Children's Trust is a deeper understanding of what literacy opportunities children have and what the resources are within our community and the specific needs that children have. So, within Alachua County, we have all of the, knowledge, resources, and people to solve this problem, and yet we're all kind of spinning our wheels, and we have so many programs across the county, but there's no real assessment of what those programs are and specifically which needs they meet and which needs they don't. So for example, we need an understanding of like which programs are dealing with, so a Reading Buddies program would be very different than a literacy intervention program. And when we have, such a high rate of illiteracy, we have 7 out of 10 Black children in our community are not reading on grade level. In, communities like in the Williams neighborhood, that's 9 out of 10 children. And so you're talking about that's an enormous amount of need there. And buddy reading programs won't necessarily address it, while they may help develop a love for literacy. And so we need an overarching needs assessment just related to literacy to look at the types of organizations that are providing services, the knowledge and skill level of the people who are volunteering or working in those organizations, and the specific children the specific children whose needs are being met through those organizations, to make sure that there's a good match. And so in our first funding cycle for the Children's Trust grant, it was generally, if you were in this area, you could write a grant and get funded, but there was no real indication to help people understand what needs need to be addressed. And so I think that we would be well served to do a literacy evaluation of our entire community and really understand geographically what's accessible and who the organizations are, so that we can start to do collective impact work and really harness the power of the organizations that we have available to us. The other thing I'd like to point out here is that you have children ready for kindergarten, and that's 50%, 57% of kindergartners, but we don't have that disaggregated by race. And even though that's it's a difficult number, as one of the other people said on the call, it would be helpful to have that by race. And then I also want to point out here that we have 3rd grade reading levels at 31% for Black youth, and then our high school graduation rates are 80%. And so how does that happen? And part of that problem is that if people drop out before a certain point in time, or if they get tracked into SciTech or something, we don't follow them. And so it looks like 80% of our Black youth are graduating. However, we know that until graduation year, their numbers are really, really, really low. And so using that as an indicator is definitely problematic. one thought about an indicator that might be helpful, and I don't know exactly how this works with the Children's Trust, but an outcome-based measure, like, you know, a year out of high school, who's employed and how are they employed, or who's in college and how are they doing? And so kind of like, what's our outcome here is that we want healthy adults. And so tracking them, you know, at that point might be more beneficial. I also wondered about, and this came up earlier, it was about children who are incarcerated or incarcerated parents. And so I wonder how many of our children are incarcerated, and are those numbers included? Because I don't see a JDC metric on when you look at the state's website to look at our FSA scores. And so I don't know how those children are being tracked and what their performance is like. And then also what happens as they go on. We have, it's primarily African-American children and adults who are incarcerated. And so making that link is definitely important. So,
Ms. Moss, would you be kind enough to send all your comments to us? Because just like Ms. Houch, Dr. Houch, and some of those comments were could be utilized. So we'd appreciate it if you could send it to us.
Thank you. I'd be happy to. All right. And this is just amazing work, by the way.
Thank you. Dr. Logan?
Did I raise my hand?
I've got it raised.
Okay, so you can hear me.
Sir.
No, I did not want to say anything new or different. I just wanted to comment again on this. We do have a continual and understandable argument, if you will, about early childhood intervention and intervention with older school-age children. And we do, and I'm glad this was brought up, we do forget that the school board actually does school-age children, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Karen, and that a great deal of federal, state and local dollars go into K-12 and children 5 to 18. A very tiny amount goes into children 0 to 5, which doesn't mean that the Children's Trust would only focus on 0 to 5. Obviously, there's no sentiment to do that. But let's not forget that a lot of taxpayers' dollars already go into school-age children, and the only opportunity 0 to 5 children have is with our dollars. And that doesn't mean we spend all of our dollars on 0 to 5, but I think we have to be very conscious of how few dollars at the federal, state, or local level go into children 0 to 5. And in fact, we may be the only funding source. So that's my only comment.
Dr. Logan, thank you very much. In the future, I would hope that this is a conversation that we kind of not shut down, but that's not really what today is about. And I would appreciate it if we just focus on what we're dealing with right now. And the funding is going to be, we're going to utilize what we're doing today, figure out how we want to fund things. And I would believe probably what we're going to do is we're going to look at the indicators, and from the indicators and derive where we're going to focus the money on. So, you know, what we're trying to do is go from 0 to 18. This is one big group that we're trying very much to make sure that they have a chance to be successful in life. And I think everybody on this board focuses on trying to do what is best for that whole group. And we'll kind of go from there. So thank you very much. Staples, you had your hand up?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, yeah, thank you for the opportunity. You know, again, agree with many of the callers. A lot of work been put into this, and I appreciate all the efforts. I wanted to suggest maybe an indicator that might go under number 2 or 3. It might fit better under number 3, as all children having nurturing, supportive caregivers and relationships. Again, I'll agree with Dr. Snyder that many of the suggestions may not have data readily available right now, but I think we as a community could, you know, come up with that very easily, or not very easily, but I think I would suggest having how many, and this might just be a capacity indicator, but how many programs that serve which age range, or how many programs such as out of school time, or programs that just support different youth at different ages. Also, you know, that indicator or that number might also be broken out into when it supports learning. So that would then go into number 2. And then which ones support mental health or other things, which might go into relationships or supportive caregivers. Because caregivers also is a broad spectrum of people outside of that students, maybe parents or immediate family. So, so I think adding a indicator or a metric that has a how many programs, so how many programs, that would be 1. 2, how many students or how many youth are in those programs, that would be maybe another indicator. A waiting list indicator, how many students are trying to get into those programs, so that are not able to get into it, that want to get into it. And then also what age ranges, and then split that up also by race, age, socioeconomic status as well, because while the school board does definitely provide a lot of opportunities, I would like to see the demographic breakdown of how many of those students are the students that keep coming up in conversations. And so that would be 1. And then on the number 2, I would, there's a big gap between 3rd grade reading levels and high school graduation. And high school graduation, I think we can all agree that those numbers can be somewhat manipulated. And so I would say that some indicators that would go in between, maybe in middle school and maybe in the beginning of high school somewhere, because if we're trying to prepare students for success after 18, I think making sure that they can read, and students may move into the county or whatnot, and those students wouldn't be counted in the 3rd grade. So there's a lot of area for the data to be not telling the whole picture. So those are my comments. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Addison. Appreciate it very much. And it looks like that is it, Anna, for the questions. So let's continue on. You holding up okay?
I'm doing great. Thank you for checking on me. Appreciate it. I have a supportive and nurturing relationship right now, I think, in this group. So the last result area is related to all children live in a safe community. So within this, I recommended 3 different indicators. The first one up is households with severe housing problems. This is one that, again, that was not brought up by the technical advisory committee, but looking at, social determinants of health. We know housing is a huge factor on all kinds of things. So I included this violent crimes. This is population one, not specific to children, but for just violent crimes going on in the community. And the third one was, sorry, I'm trying to move this little bar in my way, but the third one's related to car accidents and children injured in car accidents. So I'm going to go through them, and then we're going to do the same thing where we've discussed, is this a good proxy indicator for the result? Will this give us a way for us to start having those conversations that I think all of us want to get to, where who else is working on this? What's the story behind the data? All those really good, robust conversations, I think, that we want to have, right? So first one is severe housing problems. 1 in 5 homes are experiencing severe housing problems in the county, and that's similar to also what's in the state, but still, and that's, we're actually seeing this across a lot of rural communities in the United States. I know there are other funders, national funders, that focus on this, and even things like access to clean water within homes and all things like that. So this was one I I thought we should include because I think it's worth a discussion as an opportunity, and seeing how many households are affected by it. Again, it's a large household indicator. The next one is related to violent crime. So Alachua County is in the 4th quartile compared to the state for violent crime rates. And you can see the trend has been going up and has always been a big gap for violent crimes in the community. And then the third one was related to children injured or killed in motor vehicle accidents. So I think this is only for ages 5 to 11, but I know this data is available for, I think, 5 through 18. So there is a bigger indicator. And in the way the state collects this data, it's like 5 to 11, I think 12 to 18. But no matter what relates to car accidents, we were in the 3rd or 4th quartile. So as a county, there were quite a few children being injured or killed in motor vehicle accidents. So that's what the other one I had included. I had looked into a few other indicators like drowning, but I thought this one showed a huge trend that was negative and also had some of the biggest gaps. So I think as a discussion point, just safety in the community, particularly like preventable injuries, things like that related to it would be a good indicator to include. So those are the 3 indicators. None of these are disaggregated by race. Unfortunately, I don't think, particularly the housing one, we don't have that information, but we can look into it. And violent crimes and car accidents. Those are the 2 other indicators. Any questions about these discussion? Again, we're trying to look for opportunities within the result. All children live in a safe community.
Any hands? I'll ask a question. Doesn't this kind of, as far as the safe community, doesn't that kind of dovetail with one of the indicators that we're using as far as mental health, making sure that going on in the house is safe, that it's a healthy environment for the child? I mean, couldn't you use some of those same indicators? I know what you're concentrating on here, but it seems like there are other ones that could perhaps be better. Because as far as housing, I know that the county works with housing. I know that so I'm not so sure, what our role in housing. Yes, it's in, but I'm not so sure what our role in that is. And as far as the violent crimes, we've talked about the mental health, which also goes back to the what we discussed earlier, and the children, the children injured in car accidents. That seems like that one should be relatively easy to get a program. But anyway, your thoughts would be appreciated on that.
Yeah, I was trying to think of it as a large community level. And again, most of these might not be areas you do direct funding, but you have support systems or that systematic approach towards it so that this is an opportunity, this is affecting children and families. That's my approach generally speaking. I don't like to say, oh, well, our program A could fix this problem or support this problem. It's more thinking holistically of the result and saying within there's an indicator that's telling me that there's an opportunity for change. And it doesn't mean the funder necessarily is the one that's directly supporting it, but it's something to keep in mind that you're supporting with other things. But that's why I generally included those.
Dr. Snyder?
So the Technical Advisory Board talked about a number of different options for this particular indicator as well as others. And one of the things that they put forth, and I think was in the final report, is the CDC Social Vulnerability Index, which actually provides some of these indicators as well as others, and provides geospatial maps that actually, I think Herman shared some of those when he went through the very long presentation that we had around the recommendations from the Technical Advisory Board. And it would not, the data are already available at the county level and they're by zip code area. And so it seems to me like if these indicators and others are captured in there, I believe that was the rationale behind the recommendation that the Technical Advisory Board group had about using that social vulnerability index.
Social vulnerability index by zip code is what you would recommend?
Yes, as well, I'm suggesting that that's what I believe the the Technical Advisory Board recommendation was after much discussion. So
I remember the map, but I wasn't sure how available the data was on that. Do you know if it's
Pretty available.
It's by zip code. Yes. So in the report, there actually is a map of Alachua County with the index values reflected.
And I think a link to the source was included as well. And Lee, to your point,
Dr. Labarre, you're next.
Okay, I see this more as an environment safety, and the other to me was a home and relationship safety, whereas this speaks to the broader environment in which you live and is it safe.
You better watch out. You may be attacked by a dog.
It's my dog who hears the poor trash people are trying to come by. You know, what can I say?
You may be
I will mute
vulnerable. You better
myself
watch
again.
out. Karen Cole Smith.
Yes, and when I saw the concept of safe, I'm thinking externally as well as internal. And so when you see safe, you're thinking, okay, externally you're dealing with housing and violent crimes and being killed, but also what's going on internally, you know, behind closed doors, what we call the dark figures that never come to the attention of the criminal justice system. So I'm thinking maybe we could put something there so it'll be clear that we're talking about both when we say a safe community, external and internal.
Right.
Okay.
Just a suggestion.
Dr. Hart.
Anna, I really love an indicator about housing problems, not so much because it resides in safe community as a category, but it's highly related to other social vulnerabilities. And one thing that we know about Alachua County, it's no different from any other county. The people most likely to be evicted are women with children in the home. They're also the most difficult to place in housing, especially if there are more than 2 children. People who are evicted don't do well going to shelters because mothers are separated from their boy children at very early ages and don't feel that their boys are safe in certain homeless shelter accommodations. And one thing that we found in SWAG area, we've done a bunch of research on why the improvements that happened in SWAG persisted until 2014 and then began to slowly swing back. It's because in those neighborhoods, 30% of the households turn over every year. Every year. And those people are going from one vulnerable home to another. And I am not sure this is the best indicator, but I wholeheartedly support a housing indicator because it goes back to low birth weight babies and mothers getting sick and dying during pregnancy and a bunch of other really important early childhood well-being things.
Thanks, Dr. Hart. And Dr. Knopf wrote in the SVI census tract.
Social vulnerability index, right? That's what he means.
So, Anna, are we ready for the attendees' questions now?
Well, just to wrap up for this one, the recommendation is to keep the housing one, maybe not this one, but we might have one that's better about like housing stabilization. And then violent crimes, I think people are generally okay with keeping because it shows about environmental safety. And then car accidents, do we want to continue to have that one as an indicator?
How does a car accident impact or relate to if you live in a safe community? Is that car seat usage or something like that? I'm asking because I don't know, so.
Generally it shows like behaviors, like people are, you know, taking risks with children like that, like, you know, Obviously, car seats is a big one, but it was a big one, just disparity when you looked at your county, and it was increasing. So it could be everything from safe driving, could be anything from signs. Who knows? I don't know exactly what's going on in your county that's causing this to happen, that children are killed or injured in motor vehicle accidents, but it could be a lot of different factors. But again, it's a proxy for safety, external safety, that the children aren't necessarily as safe as they could be, especially compared to others in the state when it comes to car safety. It could be a lot of other reasons. I don't know the reason behind it, but it's something to just look at. Like, are people taking, like, do their parents have the right resources so that their children are safe? Do they have the right education? Maybe it's car seats, maybe it's not. Maybe it's everything from like vehicle safety. They're using old cars. I don't know.
Reason I ask is because we have I-75 going through, and like a few years ago, there was this church van. I can't recall how many children were killed in that, and that fell in that age group there, but there were a lot. But so I don't know if there's some metric to say, like in for residents, or does this metric does it measure residents of Alachua County, or is it just any child that was a fatality within the Alachua County boundary?
I think they're residents. Yeah, most of all these Florida chart data, it only captures residents of, so it'd be children that were born, or like residents of Alachua County. So, and again, the trend is high, so it's not a one blip incident. And it was, again, for 5 to 18, there were 2 indicators that was broken up, but both of them were still very high compared to other places in the state. And I live in Miami, so just saying, you don't want to be in the Miami section.
Dr. Labar?
And I want to echo the Pat's reference to the social vulnerability index. I do think that the global scores, and then especially as we can look into the granularity of the census tracts, I do think there's data there that would be an overall really good global index.
Okay, so we will include that. That's the recommendation, to include that indicator so we have a good one. Correct? So
I have a question about that. This would be for Dr. Schneider. Just usually indicators you track over time, they go up and down, or trends. I think the social vulnerability index has a lot of value, especially when we look at locations for programs. How would you suggest we track that over time? What exactly is how would that look?
Well, again, by census tract, just like Dr. Hart did with the SWAG initiative, looking at how those indexes are changing. The index is changing in quartiles or whatever it is. I can't recall right now, by each of those census tract areas. And Nancy, you might describe how you were able to actually show change in founded cases of abuse and neglect within the SWAG area in response to the opening of the resource center and the health clinic, et cetera.
Dr. Hart?
A lot of data is available by census tract or census tract block group, not only in Florida charts, but in the American Community Survey and other big data sets that we don't have to gather, we just have to mine them.
So to me, it's another form of disaggregation, just like it is with race and other disaggregating variables. And it allows us to not only link those demographic variables like race, but it also allows us to look at a community level, what's going on.
So you would just, if you were looking at the county, I'm just thinking out loud here, you would say X% of either census tracts are in the high need, social need index.
Correct.
Okay, so that's how you do it in X year over time, right?
Yeah.
And that gets you squared away?
You're muted.
You're on mute.
Yeah, I'll have more conversations offline. Not really, but my questions are more specific. But I understand.
Okay.
So that is the end of kind of getting a sense of, the 4 results, the indicators. Obviously, we'll make tweaks to them and make changes so that they're more robust and can help us support other areas.
And I think we have one comment from the attendees. Dr. Knopf?
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Sure can.
Okay, so there were some questions about the social vulnerability index, and I just want to provide some clarification there, is that Those data are routinely updated and are freely available for download in both the visual format, where you can actually download the shape files for SVI in either the combined social vulnerability index, or you can download the sub-indices that include socioeconomic status, household composition and disability, race, ethnicity, and language, or housing and transportation. Those are reported at the census tract level, which can also be rolled up into the zip code level if that's the preferred geographic area to look at. But then there are also Excel files that can be downloaded so that you could track either count the number of either census tracts or zip codes that were identified as highly vulnerable over time. But you can also, at a more granular level, which I think would be important when we're talking about place-based services, to look at how the vulnerability within communities may be changing. And so that you may identify several census tracts or a zip code that we're particularly concerned about. And then you can track the trend within that zip code to see if your place-based services are having the kind of impact that you would like to see.
So that makes my point. Yeah, that makes my point. It's a very helpful tool when you look at focus areas of things, but as far as a population level indicator of how our community is doing, that's what's confusing me. Do we want that? I mean, does it go up or down? That's really not how it's used for. It's used more to, it sounds like it's used more to identify areas where, programs or opportunities would best be placed. And like I said, I can talk more offline because I think it's a great tool, but I wasn't sure in the context of all these other things we looked at how it would be used. So, but thank you.
Thank y'all. Going back, you were wrapping things up. So my understanding from where we are right now is you've done a remarkable job, a fabulous presentation. And then what you're going to do is, based upon the input that you received from the panelists, you're going to go back and refine it and then submit it to the trust again. Is that the next step?
I think so. And I also think at this point we were in a good sense of, we might not know the exact data points, right? But I think we've identified some opportunities within the indicators. And I think Colin can speak next, and which is, again, I don't, the point wasn't to get to a sense of a scorecard for the community. It was to say, we have quite a bit of information. We have results that we're trying to achieve. Where can we start the discussion on turn the curve? Here are some priority indicators, and we'll certainly refine them with more information as, with the best data we have available to us, disaggregated by race and certain age groups, and incorporate, the feedback we've already had for these four. Again, I think we're already in a good place where we can even start to have discussions without like another level of report, right? I think we have good data already to start discussions.
Thank you, Anna. Colin, did you want to chime in?
Yes, and if Ashley, if you're on there and could make it so I could just share my screen real quick, I just want to point out one page from the packet.
I'm gonna stop sharing mine. Go ahead.
Am I able to do that? Okay. Give me just a second.
I heard of there you go.
Okay. Yeah. Give me just a second. I'm sorry.
You're on there.
Yep. Hang on. Okay. This is no fun on the fly. All right. Okay. Can everyone see the Martin County spread sample on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think Anna can, I think we will probably listen to this video a few times and make sure we capture all the comments, and then I'll probably follow up with a few phone calls. I did want to make a few points. One of the things I'm always afraid of having these conversations is to just get yeah, I guess Anna referred to as paralysis by analysis, but I just want to make 2 points. One is that there is no bad data. So there is a lot of data that was given to the Technical Advisory Committee that was not included in this report that is definitely usable and will be used. Also, there's a lot of data that is usable, but that probably wasn't appropriate as a large community level indicator, but definitely very, very important. So there was comments on, data on, first of all, if we don't have the data, we can't use it as an indicator right now. I know that seems self-evident, but there was some talk about data we'd like to have that we don't have. And yes, for example, wait lists for after school programs, where are the programs, all of that. That's data from where I came from. We used to collect, but there was an infrastructure to do that was built really over years and years worth of time. So we can get there, and that's all important data. And, but as far as high level community indicators of where to focus, really the whole point of this was to get some things that met the criteria that people could easily understand and help us focus on some areas quickly. So when you look at the Martin County funding strategies, they followed a similar path and came up with, in their case, 4 results that were very, very similar to what we came up with, and they were developed independently. Some of their indicators that they track are exactly the same as ours. They have some different ones on here, some that were discussed in the technical advisory, for example, that we chose not to include. And then I would say that the next steps would be to develop some specific goals under each indicator that lead us to some specific funding strategies. And in a minute, when I talk about the Pritzker grant, I don't need to go through that whole presentation on there, but there is a slide where there was some funding strategies that were developed by the Children's Services Advisory Board that could simply be continued. And we need to develop others around some of the other indicators. So really, this is a big funnel process, is my point. We start with some high-level goals and come up with some measures that give us an idea of where to focus. And then in combination with research that tells us strategies that impact those, that can impact some of those measures, and additional data, we begin to hone down and to develop the specific things we would like to fund. So it doesn't, we almost don't need to know the exact calculation of school readiness to know that it's something important to our community, regardless of how it's calculated, for example. So our community has already decided that that's important and developed a number of strategies around that already. Our practice-based coaching, but also the nurse home visiting program. All of those programs help feed into that one measure, but they also feed into other measures. So the nurse home visiting program indirectly and over time impacts 3rd grade reading. It impacts kids that graduate from high school. So the programs don't neatly, it's not an exact, it's more of a branch that spreads out. One program doesn't only impact one measure, it may impact multiple measures. So, I think really the next step, there's a number of data points that you all have asked for that may be helpful at different points in this process. So I think of, for example, Dr. Schneider, or no, actually, I think it was Dr. Hart. One of you mentioned the Youth Behavior Risk Survey. And that would give us, it would probably give, I don't think we need that to tell us that adolescent mental health is something we need to focus on, but we may need it to tell us the exact type of programs. I don't know at this point. So I just wanted to clarify, I probably did a poor job setting this up today, the purpose of this, and then where the next steps are. So when we definitely have some either implied or stated funding strategies around, making sure children are healthy and ready to school. And I think probably the next steps are to decide some of the strategies that we want to seek either get some more data or seek some more expertise, or even begin to develop, to survey some other communities and say what we would like to fund. So for example, one of the recommendations was around literacy. Literacy is definitely what third grade reading is all about. And so if that's something the trust would like to focus on, that would be an appropriate place to either do some additional assessment or use the knowledge already at the table for some specific strategies that we would like to identify. But again, it's a big funneling down process. So I guess what I would like some direction on is what would you like to see next? So we can certainly repackage this presentation and update it with the data that you want to see, and take out the indicators that are no good and add in the better ones. We may come back to you and say that there's some data you asked for that we don't have, and maybe that's an area where we need to pay for some additional assistance. Maybe you're not comfortable in recommending any program funding strategies without it. But I think, thinking of this as a big funneling down process, I would just like some direction on exactly, based on what you've seen and heard, where we should focus next to begin to develop on some funding strategies. I can recommend some, or we can have another meeting and you can discuss amongst yourselves. But I think that's probably the next step.
Okay. Dr. Hart.
I guess I just want to reiterate that Alachua County, population-wise, is a relatively small county. So some of the indicators that work really well in more populous areas are not going to work well here. So I think we need to look at 3-year rolling averages when we look at our trends. They're quite good and they're quite valuable. And we also need to look at indicators that are selected, keeping in mind our size.
Thank you. Dr. Labarta?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, but I think at the point we're at now, and given the timeframes that we're looking at over the next month or two, I think it makes sense to refine everything you've gotten today into a set of proposed sort of approvable indicators that Colin and Anna work to get to us and in front of us. And then also, from my perspective, the funding strategies and the things that fit under each of those indicators are what I hope Colin, either with the assistance of staff as they come on board or Anna as a consultant, can bring to us as suggested approaches, so that the legwork around, you've got these indicators, you've got these goals, you've done the backstory piece of them. What are you recommending as a funding strategy? And I don't know how long you feel like you need to do that, Colin, but I would look to you and Anna, or you and staff, to bring those to us once and to start thinking about those now, because as you said, we've got some indicators that are clear things that we need to work on. The race gap in education outcomes. Some of those things that are really, really clear, I don't think we need to say, is that going to be really important? Because we know it is. And so I'm kind of at a point where I'm happy to have Colin bring us some recommendations.
Ken?
What Maggie said.
Okay. Great comment. Anyone else?
I can agree with what Maggie said as well. Colin, make a recommendation, and then if he brings it back, and we can discuss it amongst us.
We can beat it up when he gives it to us.
I didn't want to say that.
I think he's having some technical issues right now. So, I think that's probably the direction that we should head in. As far as specific programs or whatever, what I didn't see in here, and I don't know whether it actually goes to the programs when we get down to that level, is parental involvement. Because a lot of this is parental involvement and what we can do. And I guess we do that on when we see programs that come to it, how does it relate to it? Is that kind of what you're thinking, Anna? Is that, we focus on children, but heaven knows it's what happens at home and the involvement of the parents and the environment that's gonna allow these children to flourish. So is that when we get to that level? Is it for the programs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
talking about robust wraparound, direct for parents, families, like all these things, right? It's not, I wish it could be like, oh, I want to, serve more, sandwiches at so I know I need to go buy some sandwiches. Like when you're talking about collective impact and changing the lives of children and family for the better, getting to these levels of results, it does take very robust approach, right? So it's not as easy as, impact.
Colin, when you were, Tina, go ahead.
I want to say something because when you say like parental involvement, like data shows that you can take high income, not poverty stricken minority children and they still don't fare as well in the society as white children. So you can have a very involved family, good resources, they receive, and a black kid still may not do as well as another white child. So I don't want us to I don't want to serve on another board where the parents get blamed for the low performance. I'm not dismissing the environmental impacts, but I don't want us to focus in and hone in on, because that's how I receive it. You may not have meant it that way, but that's how
No, I don't mean it that way at all, Tina. The way I meant it was, is the assistance to the parents to, if there's a problem as far as what, let's face it, in a lot of situations, being a good parent is a result of not ever having that being around necessarily good parents or parents that didn't have were never really shown what it meant to be a good parent. And I think that, and this is not racial whatsoever. This is, when I mention this is, it can be a white person, a black person, a green person. I don't care. What I'm saying is that, sometimes it means that a parent, parents don't really know what they're supposed to do. And if they are shown what they need to do to help their children, then it makes all the difference in the world. So if you construed it as a racial thing, it's not racial whatsoever.
No, I mean just blaming the parents. I'm
not blaming the parents, but parents are,
oh, they're key. Now, I'm not going to dismiss that. And I think also another thing I wanted to say before I stop is that I think when we're making these decisions and we're having programs that we should really emphasize to providers that the people that they're serving, they should really go to the people and invite them in to give input on what it would take to help them. Ask them, don't make the decision and then say, oh, and by the way, do you think this will work? Because sometimes people, I've heard several people when I've been out in the community campaigning or just working on anything, even when I was advocating for this tax to be passed. That's what I heard that several times from people to say, well, it doesn't really matter. It's just going to be people, we vote for a tax to come in and it'll be other people making decisions about how money will be spent to help us instead of people involving us in the process. So that's another thing that I'd like to say. Sometimes the parents that they haven't been served well by the systems that are in place, and we do need to do some disruption. Was held earlier. But we want to really, like I said, when you said that just kind of like the fingernails on the chalkboard to me. I don't want us to really to blame the parents and to say like, oh, we have this issue here because this wasn't, a parent didn't do X, Y, and Z. So
my comments were just about assisting parents to be there for their children and to help in the process. So,
okay.
I guess I'd like to chime in on that. I think what I would hope is that as we look at the story behind the indicator, the research, that part of that research is letting people tell us what the structural barriers are, instead of assuming that it's any of these, whether it's parental engagement or whether it's early learning, it's let's understand and take some opportunity to change some of the structural things that have made it difficult for these kids to succeed. And sometimes we, you know, it's easy to say, oh, they haven't had this much parental involvement, or they didn't have 5 books before they were 2, or they didn't, you know, it's, can we just ask people what they experience as the structural barriers as part of that backstory before we get into funding something that is just more of the same thing we've always kind of done, just adding more money to it.
And that's really what we don't want to do. No. Anyone else? Karen Cole Smith.
Right, I had a comment, and that is you make the updates as a result of our discussion today, that there is this demographic piece, that the demographic information is included as it relates to, you know, race, ethnicity, social class, what have you, because that will give us a lot more detail and will give us more direction as to where we want to go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I don't see any more hands. Colin, did you hear what, I don't know if you got the gist, but I think pretty much it was unanimous that what people would like on the panel is for you to come back and bring us the updated versions with some recommendations on recommendations going forward.
Okay, I heard that. Thank you.
Did I capture that well enough, y'all? Okay. Are we ready to hear from some of the attendees? Okay. Dr. Moss?
Hello, thank you. I think this is an excellent discussion about parents and parent involvement and also parent support. And as you can see, there's a tension in there even about what is the role of parents and how are parents being supported and is it enough and in what ways are they engaged? And I really appreciate what Dr. Lombardo said about like the narrative behind the story, like what is it that parents really need? And over the past decade, I have worked in private practice with parents as an education consultant and helping them kind of navigate their children's education and resolve issues related to their children's learning and their children's emotional needs and their future life outcomes. And I can tell you the parents do need support. And it's another one of those things that it looks on the outside, like we have the Parent Academy, which now provides, you know, excellent support for early childhood. But parents of school-age children are struggling and they don't have the support that they need to meet their children's needs. One of the ways that shows up is when children are having learning difficulties. So oftentimes they have to navigate a special education system that if any of you have had to do that, it's enormous, it's monstrous and almost impossible. And so they often say, I need someone who can be a support to me in that process. And I know that the school system does receive, that was said earlier, like millions of dollars to support children, you know, in school-age children. And this is definitely true. And yet our indicators are showing that we need more than just the school system in order to make sure that the children in Alachua County get their needs met. And so looking at, you know, kind of throwing that, you know, that back, like, hey, there is something here about parents, and it might be helpful to look at what would be good indicators for parents and the support that they need or how they're involved. So that's something we don't have in there that I think that really probably warrants discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Moss. So does the board feel like there needs to be a motion? If not, we'll just
I think you just directed our executive director to formulate, to come up with a recommendation, to synthesize what's been discussed today and bring back a recommendation for us.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? There being none, all those in favor of the motion, let me wait a minute. Dr. Labarda?
Aye.
Dr. Certain? Tina Certain? Sorry.
That's okay. I'm being elevated today.
Karen Clark?
Aye.
Dr. Karen Cole Smith?
Aye.
Ken Cornell?
Aye, Dr. Certain.
Dr. Nancy Hart?
Aye.
Dr. Patricia Snyder?
Aye.
Cheryl Twombly?
Aye.
Judge Sim Wilson Bullard,
Aye.
and I. Okay, so that motion is done. So Anna, thank you very, very much for the sensational job that you did.
Yes.
And we appreciate it very, very much. I believe Dr. Murphy, Colin Murphy, would you explain the next item? The Pritzker Children's Initiative Grant.
Yes, I will. I'm actually pretty excited that we have been selected to receive a grant from the Pritzker Children's Initiative. This actually was, the relationship came from, with the Pritzker Children's Initiative came through actually Commissioner Cornell and Claudia Tuck and their work with the National Association of Counties, I believe. And Alachua County was selected to receive a 3-year grant. The Pritzker Children's Initiative has really two primary goals, and that is to increase the number of families and children with prenatal to age 3 who are connected to essential health, developmental, and social emotional services and supports, and to increase the number of low-income infants receiving affordable, high-quality childcare. So the trust back last year in September, almost a year ago, submitted a letter of interest, and then in January submitted an application. And finally, after a site visit with, or a virtual site visit with our partners, which included Tom Tonkovich with the county, myself, Julie Moderi from Well, Florida, Diana Duque from the Department of Health, and I feel like I'm leaving somebody out. I'll think of it in a minute. Anyways, we were selected, so we will get a staff person that will, we call him a Pritzker Fellow, but probably change the title to an early learning policy specialist or something, not exactly sure, but that person will work for the next 3 years to help us accomplish the main objectives of the grant. Now, I did include a presentation. I can go through that if you'd like. It's probably been a while since you heard of this, but we've had a long meeting. So just by consensus, would you like me to go through the presentation?
No.
No. Okay, so I won't do that.
Okay. So do we have a motion?
I move that he be allowed to execute the contract.
Second.
A second. I have a motion, a second.
Colin, this
Any
is a
discussion?
Colin, this is a $250,000 3-year grant, correct?
Yes, $250,000 3-year grant. We do, we are supposed to match it. And I've included, and some of the match can be in kind, but there's also a cash match. And I've included those amounts in the item. I don't have it, I messed up my paper, so I don't have it in front of me, but I think we're matching 48,500 the first year, 71,335 the second year, and 91,755 the third year. Most of that will be for things like some of the benefits, and then supplies and travel and things like that for the fellow, as well as some contracted services like developing an app and other things. So yes.
Good job from Claudia and Tom and the whole team.
Yeah, they did great.
Any further discussion? If not, to avoid the whole issue of titles, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The motion is unanimous. Colin, you want to do the last one, funding for pandemic learning pods?
Yes. And if you give me just a minute as I flip through some papers, they got out of order. But at the last meeting, excuse me. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, at the last meeting, there was a request from the community, both at the meeting and behind the scenes, to develop some kind of distance learning alternative for children whose parents did not feel safe sending their children to school, but still wanted some sort of structured environment for them to participate in distance learning. And so I want to let you know that we received a proposal. I think that was part of some professors and endorsed, I think, by the Black Parents Support Network. And the idea was to organically place learning pods at faith-based facilities or after-school programs or other facilities around the county that could serve these kids. We did run into some barriers, and most of these barriers were barriers created by adults. So for example, what happens when you place kids that are K to 5 in all-day environments is that becomes childcare, and those facilities need to have a license through DCF. So what we found is that while the group that made the proposal was willing, on such short notice, we didn't have the capacity to do the program exactly that way. So instead, we went the route of utilizing existing infrastructure through the Early Learning Coalition. And the Early Learning Coalition funds about 400 children currently in school readiness who are school age, that is age 5 to 13. And so many of those parents are the same parents who have some children in some of our current after-school programs. So the first part of this proposal was originally going to be to fund the difference to keep those kids at the site all day. The day before the board packet went out, the Office of Early Learning somehow came up with some funding, or funding through the feds, agreed to provide that funding. So all of those current children that are funded through school readiness would be able to be funded all day. So, however, that would not move any kids from the wait list that may be on the wait list. So this proposal provides 200 additional seats for children that are either on the wait list or that do not participate in the school readiness program because they don't qualify for some other reasons. So that's the main part of the proposal. One of our child care provider, or one of our after-school providers, did have the appropriate license to see kids during the day, and so that was, I'm drawing a blank, Kids Count in Alachua County. And so rather than leave those children out, the proposal is to provide a direct contract there. So that is the proposal that we were able to get worked out in the last 7 or 8 days between here and the meeting. So that is what this particular recommendation is for and would fund.
Ken?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Colin, as I understand the proposal, it's to target kids 5 through 13 below 200% of the federal poverty level. It's 186,000 the ELC and 30,000 the kids count. And this is, okay, and so it's a 9-week program. So I'm very supportive of this. I guess what I would ask is that if we get some data after school starts, about halfway through, or if we could get a mid-level kind of report back, this might be something that we should request some additional funding from the county commission for. And I would just ask that we think about that as this is proceeding. I know it's a new thing, but new things have different funding sources, CARES Act funding sources. And so if it's working, I kind of, at our last county commission meeting, said that this was being looked at, and I let the board know that there may be a request coming from the trust. So I would ask that that we at least do that, and I would move staff recommendation.
Plus, once you include that as well.
And plus
a review.
Yeah, review after maybe, I don't know, 4 weeks to see if there's additional funding opportunities that we could request from our partners, I guess they're across the street at the county commission.
I'll second.
Do we have a second?
Motion. I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion and discussion. Do we have any discussion?
Lee, I actually have a question, and I don't have it pulled up in front of me.
Okay.
Would the availability on this Kids Count contract to extend their funding potentially for the semester? And why I ask that is we have 2 virtual options. The one of which we asked parents to make a 9-week commitment, which was the Digital Academy. But if parents sign their children up for eSchool, we ask for a semester commitment because it uses a different curriculum path. And to transfer before the semester is a little bit trickier. And so we may have some students, not knowing which students they're going to serve, that may impact that there may be a need for students to receive that service through the semester. So I don't know if that, I don't have it pulled up to know if that's a possibility with this contract or not.
Colin?
This is all new funding. So if you look on the fiscal impact, the funding is coming from that 2 million that we haven't used yet.
Okay.
So we have the money to do that. I think originally, I'm trying to remember why this was for 9 weeks. There was a reason why we originally did it for 9 weeks, but we can certainly come back. We could just do that one now if that's what you want to do. We could do them both now for now or December. But we could do however you'd like to do it.
Right. I think
Karen, didn't the 9 weeks correspond with what the state had done as far as they were going to try, whatever for a short period of time?
Right. So our digital academy was designed for 9 weeks because there was kind of that push to let's get through that first 9 weeks and see how things go.
Yeah.
But I also like the idea of coming back at the midpoint, whatever the midpoint looks like, to review the situation at that point. So it may not be that we go ahead and say, yes, fund a semester at this point, but just after a review of the information at the midpoint, that there could be an option to extend that funding for those that need it. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen at the end of the 9 weeks, and parents may be ready to send their children back to a brick and mortar situation or possibly not, and we would need to extend that funding for those students who need it.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? Dr. Hart?
It's just a comment from your public health nerd. Nothing will change until we have a vaccine. So I really think a reasonable parent who likes a 9-week program is going to say, let me stay here until the semester's over.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think
Appreciate it.
I think it's important that we get some data because the CARES Act funding that we have to spend it by the end of the year, December 30th.
Right. And Dr. Snyder?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on that. When we get the data, can we find out who are these providers that are going to be applying to the Early Learning Coalition, where they're located, and get some sense? Is there any way, Karen, for us to get some sense about where families are choosing this option, so that last time when Dr. Halchin and others presented this, there was interest in trying the best we could to identify sites that were closer to where families might need those options available to them. So Colin, I don't know if you're in your conversation with the ELC, but I think it would be helpful to be able to know who's doing it and where they're located.
Yep, that was my question too.
Okay.
Right. So we have a good number of students, and depending on the school, it's right around anywhere from 42 to 55% of any of our schools where parents have chosen some type of virtual option. So realistically, you could have, a site supporting that near any one of our schools, because it's all shaking out very close to the same, quite honestly, of the numbers of families that have selected some sort of digital option. So I think until we know the names or who the students are that would be accessing one of these programs, then we could better, identify what schools are attending. But the provider would also probably be accessing that information from the parent as well. Once a child gets registered, that may be the second question is, what school do you attend?
My question was along the line of where has ELC identified sites where these pods will be hosted? I fully support the idea. I liked it at the last meeting, but I want to know if they are going to be, if there are sites already designated ELC sites, or I know Kids Count is over near Rollins, so that's in a community that serves marginalized students. But are there any other sites that have already identified where we know that there would be students whose parents possibly want the digital option, but they can't afford to provide it, and where the children can get there fairly easily, walk or bike there or something like that?
Colin, can you answer that?
Yes. So, Ms. Certain, all of the centers will have to already have an existing contract with the Early Learning Coalition. That's part of the deal. That way we know it's licensed. That way we know it meets all of the legal requirements. If you look in the scope of work that I submitted in the packet, we did narrow it down to certain zip codes. Now that was really prior to this universal funding from the Office of Early Learning, but we can certainly say that we want to restrict our extra dollars to people they call off the wait. They wouldn't that they call from who are on a wait list to certain zip codes. And what was your other question? I'm sorry. Was that it, or was there more to that question?
Yeah, I wanted to know which neighborhoods, which sites that would potentially enroll students.
So it would be right now, as this is written, it would be sites with early learning contracts for school readiness in these zip codes.
Okay, does that conclude from the board? Okay, attendees. Dr. Houchin?
Hi. So I just wanted to underscore, I'm really grateful that this idea gained some traction and we were able to make some kind of arrangement with the Early Learning Coalition to get some children's needs met. I'm going to take a look at the map and look at the zip codes. I didn't see that in the packet, but perhaps I didn't look closely enough, so I'll go take a look at that. But the idea behind the equitable learning pods was to ensure that children whose families live in the most marginalized areas of our county have access to this, because a lot of people are able to enter pods and it's cost prohibitive to families who are not. The second idea was that the pandemic is a racialized pandemic that is overburdening Black and Brown communities. So when we took a look at the DCF data to see where licensed facilities are, we noticed that there was zero DCF licensed facilities in the Lake Forest elementary school zone, and there was one on the list in the Williams zone. And that's the need that I just want to underscore, is that we've got a lot of capacity to build for children to have some kind of services outside of the school building in those particular communities. So I'm just urging the trust to look at those zip codes and make sure that they overlap with where we have nearly 100% minority enrollment in schools like Lake Forest, and where we have substantial achievement gaps and substantial socioeconomic income gaps at the elementary and middle school, as well as high school level. And, all of this leads back to my earlier comments about investing in infrastructure so that we are not just relying on schools to provide services for those families.
Thank you, Dr. Houchin. There was a question from somebody, Mary Lynn Parker. When will the sites for the pods be announced? Colin, you have any idea about that?
Yeah, the Early Learning Coalition, you would fill out an application. You would have to go through their application process, and they would provide a list of all of the sites that would be eligible for this. They won't tell you which one to pick, but they'll provide the list. And I understand that it is less than ideal and not the exact vision, but we did realize that we did have a problem with capacity and then getting up to capacity so quickly. So this is the best we could do in this amount of time.
Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Anyone opposed? Motion's unanimous. Okay, all right. This is time when the general public gets to, if there's something on their mind that they would like to express to the board, this would be the appropriate time to do so. So if you would like to do the raise your hand like y'all been doing previously, and let us know. Okay. Go to board members' comments. Anyone from the board would like to make a comment? The floor is yours. And I will be
I
diligently
just wanted
looking.
to thank Colin and Anna in particular for a really, really helpful presentation and consolidation of what was a phenomenal amount of information. I think it really helps organize our thinking and point us in the right direction.
Thank you, Maggie. Anyone else? No one else? Going once, going twice. The next meeting will be Monday, the 31st, which I believe is in 2 weeks. So at 4 o'clock, and it'll be another virtual meeting. So look forward to seeing y'all then, and I hope y'all have a absolutely fantastic 2 weeks. Yes.
Lee, just so you know, and I think everybody knows by now, but the governor extended the virtual meetings to the end of September.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. All right. Thank y'all very much. This meeting is adjourned.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.